just a little bit. I wish they were just a little bit more efficient. I should mention that I'm flying on. Oh, this isn't going to go well. Okay, gotta just try that one again. But I'm flying on the GNB 3S 450 milliamp battery, so I'm not flying on a big battery. Usually when I'm flying this and I want to go on a longer flight, I'll go ahead and pick up a 520. I know many people out there are reporting that they're getting 3 to 4 minute flights on similar builds with the 3S 450. Apparently my flight style is just really hard on batteries. I just don't get that. So something to be aware of, that even though I'm flying that battery and I'm only going to get about 2 minutes, I don't even think we get quite all the way to 2 minutes, maybe because I have a hard time landing. And that brings me to another point. I actually lowered the digital idle on this one because I had a hard time bringing it down out of the air. So I lowered the digital idle from 4.5, which is the default, down to 3. And I felt that I could get that down out of the air so I could stay under the trees, the canopy, I oftentimes call it. And I crashed a little less often when I did that as well. It didn't seem to have any impact on zero throttle moves, or at least the ones that I do. With those big punch outs over the house and the dive down, and then some snap flips and rolls. The digital idle at 3 seemed to be fine, so that I didn't have a problem. I could put a bigger battery on, and that would help to keep me down as well. But sometimes I'm flying something else that needs that bigger battery when I have time to fly. So the little ones it is oftentimes for this little guy. But as you can see here, I'm having troubles bringing it down in the air. Oh, I stand corrected. We're going to get just a touch over 2 minutes. And that current meter is nowhere near too accurate. I have not scaled that at all. So I don't think there's a whole lot to cover. This isn't really a review. This is just me kind of showing it to you. I think maybe the most interesting thing that's going to come from this video is this mount. I have destroyed one of these mounts I've had. I've had this a while, and I fly it, I crash it. I tore, I think it was this arm, clean apart. Again, this isn't a mount that I bought. This is from my printer, and it's okay. And I'll link this mount down below. Don't forget to tip your designers over there, Thingiverse. But I printed a couple of these. Actually, I've got a box full of various mounts, so I have these. And the reason why I went with the fin was I did want to protect my VTX connector here between my antenna and the PCB board right here. So this fin would help me a little bit. It also gave me a little hole to route my zip tie, so I could put my antenna up in the air, which isn't helping my failsafe, of course. I think it's a problem with the receiver. I probably just need to reflow the solder joints on it. But anyways, so this is how I mounted my antennas for that. And yes, I did change the angle on the antenna off the VTX. Pretty much all you have to do that is just warm up this top joint, get it nice and hot, and just kind of flex it down. You might need to add a bit of solder back in, but I don't think I did. But again, I wouldn't recommend this board. If you come to the channel regularly, you probably heard me talk about it. It's kind of a shame. Pyro has such good quality products and customer service. The solder joint on this board is terrible tiny. Let me get one out. So we've got a couple of boards out here. I just wanted to show you the Pyro board first, get a good angle on how close together those soldered pads are. They're really just solder holes. They're really close together. And if you have a motor like the Diatone Mambas, I wouldn't even try to get the Mambas on here because they use a thicker gauge wire on the Mamba motors. And I don't know if it's viable, even to the most expert of soldering. I just don't know if you're going to be able to get it on there without those two touching. Without two of them touching, excuse me. The only one that's other comparison, this is the GEP RC, and you can see pretty plainly the difference in the size of the pads. The distance between the pads is probably a little harder to make out. Let me see if I can zoom in a bit. So hopefully if I can hold steady, you get to see a little bit about the distance between the pads. And I know the GEP RC pads are quite a bit larger. But this size would be okay if the distance between them wasn't so close. This is a Nameless RC board. This is kind of the traditional style with the USB port out the top. Wanted to also compare it to this so that you can get an idea of what you're getting into with these two boards, because I think these two are just about the same. So extreme challenge to get your motors connected there. You're going to have to be pretty careful. Of course, Nameless RC has the other board, which if you're building a hoop now, I would recommend this one that has the USB port up. I recommend this one because you've got the USB port laid over. I think that makes a lot of things easier. It gives us more opportunities for different mounting. And then we have pads out on the edge of the board, so that'll make things a lot easier. And they have pads on both sides of the board for all your soldering needs. So this is the board from Nameless RC that I would recommend for anybody who's soldering, because this one and the Beta FPV board, I have got a bias right now, or a very strong opinion, that I think we need to move to this horizontal mounted USB port. I think that's a much better purchase, because if you buy one of these and then later on you change your mind as a frame, you have to hope if you have a vertical USB port that the frame is going to work. And then you have to take this USB port into consideration in your mounting, because you'll need to reach the USB port at least once when you're setting things up. Maybe you do that before you actually have everything assembled. But I just think this is a better option, because we can, your canopy, if you're using a canopy, can be right, whoops, I've kind of flicked that all over the place, can be pretty much right down on top of it, and you're going to have some sort of a standoff right here, probably a nylon standoff. So this gap is not huge, and having that tiny little extra gap, you can, bury this thing under here. I'm sure you can just snip out a bit of your 3D printed canopy if that's another route. I just think it just gives us so much more access, whereas I have canopies that don't have access back here like this one does. And this is from PyroDrone as well. PyroFlip RC is also another name that that web shop goes by. But you have a lot of different canopy options, and you can modify them easily. So if you don't have a printer, or you're not someone who designs prints, a horizontal USB port is going to make things a bit easier for you. And I think we'll start to see more canopies come with that in mind as an element to differentiate from other canopies, and frames for that matter too. I think other than the board and the amp draw being a bit high, those are really the only two things that I think most people will get from this video. Maybe a little bit of a fun flight. Obviously, I used a longer screw in the front so I could change my camera angle, but this mount only comes in a 30-degree tilt. I'd like to see something that was at 20 degrees as well, and it holds the camera very well. That's one thing I'll say for this mount. It holds the camera very well. Outside of the other features, it holds the camera very well. I said that 3 times already. You get that? It's hard to get out. It's a lot easier to get in, but it's hard to get out. When I tore this part on the last one, I had a doozy of a time getting the camera out. But that's a good thing. You don't want the camera coming out. Be careful when these all-in-one cameras. Don't pull them from the PCB. You need to be pushing from the lens. If you pull back here, you're going to end up separating the lens from the sensor on the board, and that's probably going to give you a fit, getting it all lined up just perfect so that it has the image quality that you're used to seeing. So that is my toothpick. I think just about all the components were bought from PyroDrone or PyroFlip. And I've got a list down below that if you choose to build one just like mine, that you'll be able to do that just buying parts from PyroDrone, I think. I'm not certain about the camera. There's not that many parts to these things. Okay, if you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the section down below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching. Hello, everyone, and thanks for coming back.
Alright guys, so I got another overview video here on some of the new Express LRS Happy Model parts that have come in. I already did a video on these super tiny receivers, see right here, and also the micro module, which you can see is in this 3D printed case already. That video I will link down in the video description. Check that out if you want to see details on those. They sent some additional parts here that expand their ecosystem. I'm kind of curious as to why there's no other companies besides Happy Model getting into this Express LRS parts. Hopefully we'll get some more competition in here, because I do know that a lot of you guys are like weary about Happy Model and their quality control. Now, my thinking is on their quality control is that they sell a lot more stuff than other companies. So say that, company A is a really good company, but they only sell 10 parts, and one person complains about a bad part. Okay, that's a 10% error rate, and everyone thinks it's a good company. But company B, let's just say everyone thinks they're a bad company. You see 10 complaints online, 10 times the number of complaints, but then they sell 10 times as more. They sell 100 of the same part, but it's the same 10% error rate or failure rate. So both companies are the same. It's just the perception of company B is worse because they just happen to sell more. Because the failure rate is the same, you get more complaints. You never hear about the people that are like, oh, it's great, it works perfectly. You only hear about the complaints. So that's my view on that. I'm not going to get into that whole thing there, but I do wish that there was more competition in this area. I do like the fact that Happy Model is making some really interesting parts here, and I hope to see more. Anyway, I have 2 all-in-one boards. They're basically they're whip boards, And so we have the 915 megahertz board here. And what's interesting is I posted some photos of these up on Instagram, and they're like, "Oh, these receivers are way too big. They're gigantic." And this is not a receiver. This is an all-in-one flight controller board. So, okay, let's just put one of these down. This board here has a 4-in-1 AC flight controller. It's got a video transmitter and the Express LRS receiver built into the board, which is incredible. So yeah, if it were just a receiver, yeah, it'd be too big. But this is like you could basically build a whole quad out of this little thing, which I'm going to eventually do. And which is the point of this video, is I want to show you what these look like before I stick them into a quad and you can't see them up close. This board does come in a 950 megahertz version and 868 megahertz version. So depending upon your region, you're going to want to get the correct one for your region. It does come with this standard antenna here. If you want like the antenna that's like an Immortal T, I think you have to get a separate. You can buy them separately for extra cost. But for small builds, you want something like this for reduction of weight. But yeah, the antenna is detachable on this one here. But the VTX antenna is not on this particular version. But if you look at the 2.4 gigahertz version, this is what the 2.4 gigahertz version looks like. They got the ceramic antenna, so there's no additional antenna for the receiver. That whole receiver and the antenna is built into the board like that. But the VTX antenna is removable on this particular version, so it comes separately like this. This is the other parts to get the antenna, plus I think it's connected for the video. And then, of course, you get your battery lead here. It's going to be PH2 connector. That's pretty standard for this. I think the ESCs are everything. So basically, this is both these boards are based off of the Crazy BX design, which has like the video transmitter and the receiver built in. So this is really only for 1S, and the ESCs are only rated up to 5 amps. So you're pretty limited in terms of what you can put this in. If you want to put this into like a 5-inch 6S quad, no, this is not going to work on that. This is going to be limited to like whoops, maybe some toothpick class type of boards, on 1S. But again, at 5 amps, if you're really pushing things and you crash, for example, and put a nice little burst of power or voltage to this board, you'll probably pop some ECs and some other components because this is very densely packed. So for those of you guys that are probably pushing things really super hard and crashing a lot, I would not recommend this for you. This is really going to be for those guys that are trying to build things that are super light, trying to maximize flight time, those kind of things, and not really, doing a lot of bashing. I don't think these things are going to be able to take a lot of crashing. But for maybe, whoop style flying indoors on 1S, should be okay. We'll see. I'm not sure if I'm going to put this into whoop. I'm thinking I'm going to put this into the Recon 3, actually. See if it actually survives that one or not. That's probably the upper limit of something you probably want to put this in. But just, again, looking at the board again, get your power lead here for the battery lead. And not a lot of things to solder. You can disable the video transmitter on these boards. There is a solder blob here somewhere. Okay, so the solder blob is right there. If that's bridged, that means there's power to the onboard video transmitter. But if you don't want to use the onboard video transmitter and you want to use a external video transmitter, you have to desolder that or get rid of that solder blob. And then you have solder pads here for video in and video out for an external video transmitter. I think the internal video transmitter is only limited to 25 milliwatts, so you're not going to be flying super far away. But if you disable the onboard video transmitter and solder on an external video transmitter, then you should be able to get more range that way. Alright, so this is how much the 2.4 gigahertz board weighs. 4.58 grams. This is how much the 915 megahertz board weighs with the antenna. They're going to take it off. 4.93 grams. So, yeah, just think about under 5 grams for pretty much everything that you need to build a quad, except for the frame, the motors, and camera. I think that's it. You got a camera, motors, and a frame, and you got a whole quad. And yeah, depending on what those other components weigh, the quad could weigh pretty much next to nothing. All right, so take a quick look at the module here. This is actually only for the T-Light. So here's the antenna. It's removable. This is not a 3D printed module case here. It's actually like made out of aluminum or metal. It's for heat dissipation. They designed this power module, and so you're going to have to consult the product page with some diagrams and wiring diagrams on how to plug everything in. Don't believe any soldering is going to be needed, because you have to basically do some rewiring inside your T-Light to basically reroute the power. That's what this power module is for. It basically allows the 1S power to power the transmitter module without burning out the radio. So I actually bought another T-Light here, brand new one, because the one that I'm using for Crossfire is actually modified already, and it's also broken, so it's not going to probably work with the setup here. So I'm going to have I'll probably make a separate video, maybe later. The actual install is pretty simple. Like, you have to open it up, and then all the connectors and everything are right in the bag here. And it's fairly straightforward as to how you're supposed to do the power rewiring. So basically, you have power coming in, and battery in over here, and battery out over here, and then that goes to the module here. So basically, you have a pass-through that's coming from the 1S LiPo. So battery in, battery out. This goes back to the T-Light board, and then these two here are, one goes to the module, this one over here, and then another one goes to the T-Light, and that's for the control of the signal and everything. Pretty straightforward. If you look at the diagram, it shouldn't be that hard to figure out, but it looks like this is kind of a permanent install, because it has like a thermal pad here, and you have to screw this onto the back of the T-Light. So this isn't one of those where you can kind of swap it out in and out for a Crossfire. Maybe I'll look into seeing if it's possible to do. It could be possible. It could be done if there's some modifications, or maybe some 3D printer parts might be able to do something like that. But it looks like this is basically going to be just for this T-Light. So that's why I got a separate T-Light just for this one, and another one for Crossfire. Because it looks like it's to be able to switch back and forth between this and Crossfire is probably not going to be that easy. Also, kind of wondering if this power module might be useful for Crossfire as well, in terms of rerouting the power around that 1S power limitation if you don't do the modification. So that, I'm not 100% sure. I'm going to investigate that, but putting this together and on the T-Light shouldn't be that difficult if you just follow the wiring diagrams on the product page. Now, regarding like tutorials and all this kind of stuff, I'm considering putting some of that together. Basically, if you go to the Discord and like the wiki page, they do have instructions on how to like do the flashing and all that kind of stuff. And also on the product page, there's going to be some instructions on how to do the binding. For example, the binding on these all-in-one boards is just via the Betaflight SPI bind RX command, because these are just SPI receivers. They're just using a different protocol. So binding shouldn't be too difficult getting it going on the board. And then, of course, you use the ExpressLRS Lua script and OpenTX on your radio to initiate binding on that side. So none of the firmware, I think, needs to be updated at this time. But later on, because everything right now is still in beta, so later on when more finalized firmware comes out, I may do a tutorial on how to do firmware flashing. Because right now things are still kind of early days, and I don't want to put a video out that's going to be outdated in a couple weeks. That's happened before, and I end up just doing a lot of work and then taking the video down after like a couple weeks, which really is pretty annoying. So I'm going to hold off on that until things kind of settle down. This is really still for early adopters, in my opinion. If you're someone that wants like, easy, carefree type of like updates, you probably want to be looking at Crossfire, because you don't have to worry about like firmware mismatching problems. Make sure that all the firmware on all the receivers and everything are exactly matched, because Crossfire takes care of that for you in the background. I don't believe this ecosystem does that yet. So you're responsible for making sure that the firmware on the module and the firmware on the receiver are all compatible with each other. That's kind of the big problem with the R9 system, is that firmware mismatching problems led to massive headaches and just all sorts of issues for end users because its ecosystem wasn't very friendly. So right now, I think this is really for early adopters. If you're a newbie, I would stick with something a little bit more user-friendly like Crossfire or Tracer and just pay a little bit more money for that. Now, obviously, if you're looking to the future, this might be the future if they can figure out the sort of firmware problems or so the ecosystem in terms of like making the firmware updates and all that kind of stuff very user-friendly and easy to do without a lot of thinking. Then yeah, this could be something for you down the road, but I think right now it's still kind of a wait-and-see sort of situation. Anyway, here's just a quick look at the transmitter board regarding whether or not this will work with the X. Alright, so sweetie, we're checking out another vendor with a bunch of...
Hello everyone, today kind of an announcement, the Happy Model ES24TX Slim Pro. This is an Express LRS module, and this fits in our game style controllers like the X-Lite. This happens to be the X-Lite Pro, or I've read some of you are switching from your Tango 2s over to Express LRS. If you're not familiar with Express LRS, longest range, fastest packet, meaning you get tighter field of controls, and it's also less expensive. Pretty big deal, especially with the prices. They keep going up on all our electronic components. I think if you're looking at this, you're probably asking questions about the Beta FPV. Let's cover this one real quick. This has got all metal construction, and it does have a fan inside here as well. This is not a button. That's where the LED light is, and it does change colors. And so you have heat dissipation that can happen throughout this. This is also, it fits more snugly on the back of the transmitter. You actually, when you press it in, you have to actually press fairly firm against the radio in order to get it to click down. Let's see if I can do this on camera. There we go, little hearty snap there. Right now, you won't find this in the Express LRS configurator, but I'm sure it won't take long as fast as all the devs are moving on Express LRS. By the time you order one and it gets to you, or it gets to a shop near you and you buy one, it'll probably be in there. I made the mistake of thinking that I could just flash the previous ES24TX firmware on there, and if you do that, the fan doesn't work. So lesson learned. Right now, you have to download what's already on here from the Happy Model website, and the fan does kick on whenever you're running 250 milliwatts, but unless you're doing some true long range, we probably don't need that. It does go up to 1 watt as well, so that's another sort of advantage that you might be looking for in this particular hardware. To compare it to the Beta FPV, I've covered this before, so if you're looking for more details, I'll put my original video to this and some of their other hardware down in the video description. This is plastic construction. This silver part right here, those raised ridges, those are part of the heatsink, and it does get pretty warm. No fan in this one. And it goes up to 500 milliwatts. I had to check my notes there real quick. This does have a bind button on the back too, so that could be handy for some of you. This one does not. You have to use the bind command either through the Lua script, or you have to use passphrase binding. This one does get pretty hot. I've flown this one outside in the hot, we're kind of in the tail end of the dog days of summer, and while it doesn't get hot enough, at least in my use cases, that it's uncomfortable to the finger, if you put it, like I described in one video, in more tender skin areas, maybe the inside of your forearm, I sometimes carry stuff like this because I just grab stuff and go fly in the backyard. It can be uncomfortable in those particular areas to where you wouldn't want it to have it sitting on there very long, especially if it's still powered on. We do have some antenna options that you can choose to. It's probably not going to matter much unless you're doing that extreme long Wesley Barty sort of testing. Most of us common folk, we're going to be fine with the whip or linear antennas that they come with. This one doesn't come with this Moxie antenna, by the way. One question I see coming up about Express LRS all the time is if I buy this TX module or this TX module, can I use this receiver and that receiver? As long as they're running the same frequency, like these are 2.4 gigahertz. So if you buy these, any of these, and then the Minmo or whatever else comes out on the market. I think I saw HGLRC pop up in the configurator, so their hardware will be hitting the market soon. You just have to buy the same frequency. So 2.4 gigahertz TX module, 2.4 gigahertz receiver, whether it's got an antenna, whether that antenna is the short little square stubby, or it's got a long, more traditional antenna on it. It doesn't matter. Express LRS helps all this hardware work together. If you buy 915 megahertz or you buy 868 megahertz, you just have to get the receivers that run those same frequencies. That's really it. You can buy whatever you want when it comes to the Express LRS hardware that works for you, as long as they're on the same frequencies, and they will work together. So that makes things pretty simple. One other thing to watch out for with Express LRS, I'm a micro person. I use a lot of Whoop type boards and a lot of builds these days. You have to make sure that you have a free UART, and that's a question I've been getting a lot about particular boards, and I have to go to the board manufacturer's website and look at the board. So you need a full UART, meaning you need a full RX and TX, and they need to be the same number. So if it's RX2, it needs to be TX2. If it's RX1, we need to have a TX1. So oftentimes it just says R1 and T1 because the boards are so small, but you need a full UART in order to be able to wire up your receiver and those to be able to work with your protocol. Sometimes in some of our Whoop boards we might lose smart audio. I don't have a running index of those. If you've got smart audio selected on UART2 and you see RX2 and TX2 is your UART pads and your boards and it's the only ones you got, it's very likely you'll lose smart audio in order to be able to run Express LRS. That's just kind of the way it is until we see some of the board manufacturers catch up. Sometimes, hopefully, that RX and TX is associated with the onboard receiver, which at that point, when you're running Express LRS, you don't care. And probably the thing I should have mentioned at the get-go is one of the reasons why I advocate for this so much, especially being a micro guy, is we can do this for relatively inexpensive, get tremendous feature set in the software, and we can get rid of D8 mode. We don't have to deal with receivers and deal with FrSky and their firmware additions. We just really D8 or D16. I know D16 still works on both the radios, but you're kind of playing difficult. You never know what your receiver is going to come with, so you might have to flash it, then you might not have what you need to flash it, so then you're in a waiting game, or you have to go find somebody that helped you with that. So anyways, that's one of the big reasons why I'm a huge advocate for Express LRS. The hardware is inexpensive. They work together. You can get tiny little receivers. This one's still wired up. Been sitting on my desk for a while. Probably can't even see that. It's got that little square antenna on top. It's actually made of plastic. But, I mean, this, every time somebody posts the picture of this receiver, and
Alright, so we're checking out the new Express LRS modules from Happy Model. These are the Pro Series. I have the micro version here and the nano version. So micro and nano refers to the module size. So the micro version here is mostly plastic, and pretty much all plastic here for the module cover. But the nano version is pretty much all metal. I think it's some kind of aluminum. It does feel heavier and quite robust, pretty strong looking. Now where it grabs onto the module bay with these metal clips, it is a very tight fit. So I have broken actually some of these clips on some of these module bays with this one because it's a little bit too tight. So something to keep in mind if you want to have a module that's going to be, you're able to take on and off. So the Pro Series is now 1 watt capable for both of these. They both have LEDs and cooling fans. No screens or no OLED screens or joystick buttons for either of these. And these both came with version 1 firmware, so I did have to update them to version 2. I updated the nano module here with the micro USB port there using the UART method, and that worked fine. You have to select the Pro Series target and Express LRS for version 2.0.1. Now the micro module, as you can see, does not have any kind of USB port, so you have to do the Wi-Fi method in this one. And since this was on version 1 when I got it, I had to use the version 1 Lua script to put this into Wi-Fi update mode, and then I connected to the Wi-Fi hotspot at the 10.0.0.1 address. I compiled the firmware and created the firmware.bin file in the configurator, and I used the Wi-Fi method, but I did not use the build in Flash, just to build, and then it would open up a folder with the bin file, and I actually saved it to my phone, and then connected to the Wi-Fi hotspot with my phone, and uploaded the firmware to the module that way. It's pretty typical of a lot of other ExpressLRS modules that use the Wi-Fi update method. I know that there's always going to be someone out there who's going to be like, hey, can you make a specific video for this specific module for my specific hardware? And I've already made some videos in the past on other updates for other modules, and this is pretty similar to those. Also, you can follow all the instructions on the expresslrs.org website. There's several different methods outlined there. It explains everything on how to do the updates. So you're not going to see a specific video for your exact setup on my channel. So if you need someone to do that, you should probably ask someone else to make a video for you for that. But if you look at the playlist link in the video description, you might be able to find an older video that actually has a little bit more detail on how to do the update, because I've done those videos in the past. And you notice here that the micro module comes with the new Moxon antenna, which looks like this. And it's SMA, of course. All ExpressLRS modules have SMA antennas. This is yet another one. Now, when I received my sample for review for the Slim module here, this came with a standard like T antenna, also SMA, and I believe now if you buy this, it will come with the new antenna. So if you're wondering about it, unless a store has old inventory, you might get the old version with this T antenna. The difference in terms of gain is not much. This is a 4 dB, and I think this one's like a 2.7 dB antenna. So, unless you're really looking for a super long range, I'd probably just go for the micro version. They're both 1 watt, so you're going to probably get the new antenna. So, it really doesn't matter, I think, at that point. I'm just looking at the profile of this module compared to the Nomino. You see it's a thinner profile. Obviously, it doesn't have a screen or anything like that. But I think the Beta FPV is also like this, kind of thin. Doesn't stick out as much out of the back of the radio. So for some of you guys who are worried about that. Also, in terms of the fit, some modules will fit better than others. It really depends on the radio, because you're going to see some differences in the sizes of the module itself. Also, differences in the sizes of the module bay based on which radio you use, because not every radio has the exact same module size bay. So something to keep in mind. But I didn't have any problems with this in terms of the radios I used. It fit fine. I know that some QX7s, I think older revisions of this have tighter module bays, and some of these newer modules have a hard time fitting into those. But I think that's a problem with the radio. Some radios have module bays that are not sized correctly. So most of the modules I've had have been working in the radios I've used, so something to keep in mind there. Okay, so I just want to show you what the fan sounds like. So this is, I see, Heavy Model ES24TX Pro, and go ahead and turn the transmitter power up, because right now I think the power is at 100 milliwatts and no fan is on, so it makes no noise. And we'll go ahead and boost up the power here. So it's 500 milliwatts. So it's a pretty noisy fan. Take up to 1 watt. And yeah, it's pretty much the same noise. And just to show you that we are now on version 2.01 on this module. Show you that yeah, it's a pretty, the power here. So it's 500 milliwatts. So it's a pretty noisy fan. Take up to 1 watt. And yeah, it's pretty much the same noise. And just to show you that we are now on version 2.01 on this module. Alright, so I'm going to show you the fan noise on the Slim module here. I'm using a nano to micro adapter. So also on 2.01. with the 500 milliwatts. So this is smaller. It's got a smaller fan, so it's not nearly as noisy. And here it is on 1 watt. But keep in mind, while the fan's smaller and not as noisy, maybe there's not as much cooling, and this will get a lot warmer. So it is all metal, so if you're holding the radio, you probably want to be careful you're not touching it with your hand if you're at the full 1 watt power rating. Alright, so here's a quick look inside the micro module. And so on the Namino and Hemp model modules, the heatsink is on the wrong side, or the opposite side of the chips. Looks like they have done this correctly on this one. Looks like the heatsink here is on top of the chips. You got your micro FL connector there, a 2 SMA adapter. Here's the fan, pretty tiny, and the connector to the board for the fan. So yeah, this is looks like a pretty solid design. It looks like the heat dissipation should be pretty good on this one, and I think people will.
This is the new Express LRS module from Axis Flying, and when I found out how much Axis Flying wants to charge you for this module, my jaw hit the floor. You see, there's lots of different reasons why you might choose Crossfire, Tracer, Express LRS, Ghost, why you might choose one of those over the others. But cost has always been something that Express LRS has solidly beat the others on. And the reason for that is that all of the Express LRS software development is done for free by the open source project. And so any manufacturer can come along and just slap together an Express LRS module or receiver and sell it basically for the cost of the hardware. And the downside of that is that you sometimes get hardware that has problems. Happy model receivers with messed up voltage regulators that burn the receiver, beta FPV modules with capacitors that are wrong on the circuit board, which means you can't flash the module. These are all things that have actually happened, and more that I don't need to list here. So what Axis Flying seems to be doing by charging $120 for this module, that's more than a Crossfire module, that's more than a Ghost module. What they seem to be doing is saying, okay, Express LRS community, do you actually want high quality, reliable hardware that performs, and are you interested in actually paying for it? Well, are you? I'm Joshua Bardwell. You're going to learn something today. The Axis Flying Express LRS module that I'm reviewing in this video was sent to me by Axis Flying for the purpose of this review. I have not received any cash or any other form of compensation in exchange for this video, and no one has had any approval or conditions on the contents of this video before it was released. One of the first things you're going to notice about the Axis Flying Express LRS module is that it's got a very different form factor from other Express LRS modules that you've seen. We've got the standard JR module bay form factor here, but the actual module itself is this part that actually separates from the JR part and is connected by a wire. We'll talk about why it separates a little later in the video. That wire is one of the things that people are going to notice, and one of the first things I noticed about this module. So when we take and put the module into the back of the radio, the wires just kind of fold up here and kind of get squished. And in fact, if you're not careful, they may not fit down into this channel. So there's this channel here designed to hold them, but depending on what you do, you may have a problem. I'm just going to twist those up a little bit to take some of the slack out of them. And you could even, if you want to make your module look like crap, you could even take a little bit of tape and kind of tape that down so it stays away. I don't know, that might be overkill. And then the module fits into the back of the radio, just like so. Now there is a good reason that they've done it this way. And the reason is that until now, it has not been possible to use Express LRS on any radio that can't run the Express LRS Lua script. And the Express LRS Lua script is used to configure certain options like the packet rate, the output power, and so forth. And in fact, in Express LRS 2.0, there are even more options that the Lua script can configure. But who cares? Because isn't everyone who's using Express LRS using an OpenTX or an EdgeTX radio, and so they can run the Lua script? What's the need for this module here on the back with the joystick and the menu? And the person who needs that is a person who has a Futaba or a Spectrum radio. Because Futaba and Spectrum radios, at least the higher end ones, can interface natively with a Crossfire module. And since Express LRS uses the Crossfire protocol to talk to the module and the receiver, that means that those radios can also be used with Express LRS, except there's a problem. Since they can't run the Lua script, you can't configure the module. Now, the way that Crossfire had dealt with that is to have the big Crossfire module with the joystick and the OLED screen, and you just use that instead of the Lua script to configure all your options. And now, Express LRS has got the same thing. So in case I haven't made it clear, the reason that this module pops off the JR here and you've got these separate wires is that if you had a Futaba or a Spectrum radio, you could wire this thing directly to the back of the radio. The radios come with a special plug that you use, and you could wire this thing up and stick it to the back of your radio with some double-sided tape or Velcro or something and have it on the back of your Spectrum or your Futaba radio. And 99.999% of the people watching this video, that's not relevant to. But if you are one of that small percent and you've always wanted to be able to do Express LRS, now you can. So if we long press this button to enter the menu, we can see the standard Express LRS options, like the packet rate. We can change that however we like. Left to exit the menu, up, down to change the options, right to enter the menu. Transmit power. The module does go up to 1 full watt of output power, and we're going to test a little later in the video to see if it sustains that. By the way, it also has a power saving feature where after 2 minutes, if it does not detect any receiver, then like you've just powered the radio on the bench, but your quad isn't powered up, after 2 minutes, it will go into a low power mode and it will go back to full power when it detects a receiver. In theory, if you were to crash way out in the field and fail-safe, which, how do you fail-safe Express LRS anyway? But in theory, if you were to fail-safe far, far away and lose signal, it would go down to lower power. And I'm not sure if there's a manual way to kick it back up out of that sleep mode. Anyway, up to 1 watt of output power, at least nominal. Change the telemetry ratio. There's a motion detect feature where if the module is face down, it turns off the screen in order to save a little bit of battery power. And when the module is face up, it turns the screen back on. Fan control. The fans will automatically turn on when the module reaches, I think it's 40 degrees Celsius. Or we can manually set the fan to on, or manually set it to off. If you're going to run at high output power, you're probably going to want to leave that on, or auto. And you can manually kick it into binding mode. Binding mode, of course, with Express LRS is usually not used. You would normally use a binding phrase, which is flashed into the firmware. That's how Express LRS prefers you to do it, but if you want to manually bind and not use a binding phrase, you can do that. I have another video I made that shows how to put the Express LRS receiver into binding mode without using a binding phrase, and I'll put a link to that down in the video description below, where I always put references like that. And then finally here is update firmware, and when we do update firmware, it starts a Wi-Fi web browser. You can then connect to that wireless network with your phone and flash firmware through your phone, like off the SD card on your phone, or if you have a laptop or a computer with Wi-Fi, you can do it from there. You also, of course, can flash using USB. There's a USB port here, and of course you plug that right into your computer and flash it using the Express LRS configurator. While we're looking at the underside of the module, you can also see there's an XT30 plug here. The module can take up to 5S voltage. That's kind of cool. That's a higher voltage. Most modules will take only 2 or 3S. It can take up to 5S voltage, and it is advertised as having overvoltage protection. I'm not going to plug a 6S in just to see if it fries and fry my only module, but you would use this if you just didn't want to be sucking down the battery on your controller quite as fast. Some people will just take some Velcro and stick an external battery into on the back of their controller or something. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to hook up my good old Immersion RC RF power meter, and we're going to measure the output power of the module. And standard disclaimer applies, the RF power meter is not a lab grade piece of equipment. If the output power is off by a few milliwatts, that's within the range of accuracy provided by this device. But I'm especially curious to see how consistent the output power is over time as the module heats up. The other thing I got to point out is that you are going to see me using the Lua script to adjust the settings on the module. And it's the reason I'm doing that is that it sure seems like the joystick stops working as soon as the module is actually talking to a radio. The only way I've been able to get the joystick to work is to power the module outside of the radio using the XT30 or the USB power. And I guess that's a safety precaution, or maybe it's just they don't want to have the menus conflicting with the Lua script, so it's like you can only have one thing controlling it. But if you were hoping to be like, oh great, I hate Lua scripts, let me just buy it for an OpenTX radio and use the joystick, it sure seems like the joystick just stops working as soon as you plug it into an actual radio. So there you go. Here we are outputting 25 milliwatts, and we're seeing approximately 37 milliwatts-ish coming out. I'm going to go ahead and crank that output power up to 50 milliwatts. And we're seeing 66-ish milliwatts. Again, I would certainly consider that to be within the range of precision of this device. And if the module is running a little higher, I think we'd all rather have a little more output power than a little bit less. We'll crank it up to 100 milliwatts. We're seeing about 140. We'll crank it up to 250 milliwatts, and yikes, that's 400 milliwatts. So maybe it's running a little hot. 500 milliwatts, and let's just go all the way to 1,000 milliwatts. Oh my goodness. Now this is the part where I'm glad that I have a 60, you can't see it, but I have a 6 dB attenuator on this thing. That is good because this little power meter isn't supposed to go over 500 milliwatts. So we're good there, but we're going to let that run. And I mean, if we're starting at 1.4 watts, even if it does come down a little bit, I feel like we're still going to be well over a watt. But let's just let that run, and I'll come back. I'll see you in 10 or 15 minutes after it's had a little while to heat up. So here we are about 15 minutes later, and the module has pretty much stabilized at about 1.3 watts. And even given the inherent imprecision of this non-lab grade power meter, I still feel fairly confident we're outputting at least 1 watt. The fan came on after about 5 minutes, and yeah, it's not the best thing to be hearing. So I would keep the output power of the module lower, unless you just absolutely need that additional penetration. I usually run my ExpressLRS modules at 250 milliwatts, and I've never had an issue with range. Speaking of binding, in order to bind the module, most people are probably going to want to flash it with their binding phrase, especially as ExpressLRS 2.0 has just released, and it's got some really cool new features that you're definitely going to want to take advantage of. I'm actually going to be making a release overview of ExpressLRS 2.0, so definitely get subscribed and hit the notification bell down there so you don't miss it when it comes out. If you do want to flash this module, it is new enough that it is not actually listed in the ExpressLRS configurator pull-down menus. There's a special procedure you have to use to flash it. You're going to go over to the Get Pull Request option, and from there you can find the pull request where the Axis Flying hardware is going to be added to the ExpressLRS project, and then once you do that, you can proceed and flash as usual. I do also want to point out, when we talked about the Beta FPV module, oh, here it is here. One of the things that we complained about was that Beta FPV has got custom code for this module, and they didn't coordinate with the ExpressLRS devs. That's from people who work on the project. They said that. And they have not submitted a pull request, although they say that they're going to. They've not submitted a pull request to have the code for this module officially included in the ExpressLRS project. So if you want to download and flash your Beta FPV module, you got to download it directly from the Beta FPV repo, which is annoying, and also, like, it's an open source project. The whole point is that you're getting all this stuff for free, Beta FPV. Give back. Why not the pull request? I don't know. But I do want to acknowledge that Axis Flying has worked very closely with the devs on this project to make this as good a module as possible. And although it is not currently as part of the ExpressLRS configurator, it has been submitted. The pull request is there. It's just a matter of time. And in fact, by the time you're seeing this, you may actually see it in the official pull-down menu and not need to go do that pull request thing. So check in the actual menu first. But if it's relatively recent, you may need to go do the pull request menu instead. Now, I feel like a lot of people want to see the inside of this module, so you see what you're getting for $127. And I'm going to open it up and show you, but I don't presume to have any special insight into, like, the manufacturing quality. Because, like, I looked at the inside of the Beta FPV module, and it looked pretty good to me. But, you know, there were no obvious signs of shoddy manufacturing. But, like, if there was a capacitor or a diode in the wrong place, I wouldn't know how to recognize that. I also want to show you before I open up the module that they've done something. They got a little storage here for, I mean, I guess they were just like, well, the space is there, let's give you something. You can put your weed in here. You can put your weed in here. That's clearly what that's for, right? Oh, wow, that's nice. I can feel that there is thread locker on there. You've got a nice iFixit toolkit. Why are you using your shitty screwdriver? So here is the internals of the module. And people who are smarter than me will have an opinion on some of the things that they see here. It's pretty cool that the fan is actually like an air intake here. It's not just a fan kind of blowing air over a heatsink, although at its essence that's what it is. Nice big custom heatsink here. The SMA connector appears to be direct soldered. It's not a UFL pigtail. That's really cool. Those UFL pigtails have a little bit of loss in them, and also the UFL connector can kind of pop off. On the flip side, if this does break, you're boned. You can't just pop off a UFL pigtail and reconnect a new one. Oh, we got this heatsink here. I don't know if I want to just... Oh, there we go. Yeah. Got some blobby solder here, that's for sure. Got a little blobby. That's an excessive amount of solder. Not the best soldering I've ever seen. I'm a little surprised to see that, to be honest. So that brings us to the end of the video, and as always, the question, should you buy it? And we have to acknowledge that for a large number of people, the answer is no freaking way. A lot of people who are interested in Express LRS are not interested in spending $120 on a controller module, no matter how good it is. They would rather buy 2 or 3 of a Beta FPV or a Happy model or a Naminmo module and take the chances. If they get a bad one, they just buy another one. But your odds of getting a good one are not that, even for Beta FPV, which I've criticized their hardware quality in the past. This is a fairly well-made module. At least this version is. The second batch, maybe they'll have some new problem. We don't know until they start hitting the streets. And that, I think, is the main thing that you're going to be paying for if you choose to spend $120 on the Axis Flying module. What Axis Flying is saying with that price point is, this is a good piece of hardware that you can rely on. So if you were the kind of person who is interested in flying a $1,000 collective pitch helicopter or a $5,000 jet or something, or you might, I don't know, Beta FPV, Happy model, and Axis Flying is saying, trust us. You can trust us. You want to pay $120 for that? The other person who's going to pay $120 for a module like this is going to be somebody who has a Futaba or a Spectrum. Bear in mind, not all of those radios will work. For the Spectrum, I'm pretty sure it's the X9D or higher. The lower ones can't do it. And for the Futaba, I think it's the 14. But you should do your research, because the lower end ones don't support Crossfire. You need a radio that will support Crossfire. And if it will support Crossfire, then it will also support this module, and you can have Express LRS on there if you prefer, and then some people will. But I think a lot of people, the cost is going to put you off, and, like, I don't know, do you really want this module hanging off the back of your radio? Well, people have been doing it with Crossfire modules for a long time, and they've been fine with it, but a lot of those people did it because they hate Lewis scripts, and this one, if it's hooked up to a radio that can do the Lewis script, it doesn't seem like the menu even works. I mean, I'll probably keep using it. I didn't have to spend $120 on it. It's probably the best Express LRS module you can buy today in terms of capabilities and in terms of hardware performance, in terms of output power and so forth. And the way that Axis Flying has worked with the Express LRS project is certainly something that I feel like supporting. But for you, who got to spend your own $120 on this, well, the Naminmo Flash module is pretty freaking good. Even this Beta FPV module looks pretty freaking good if you flash Express LRS firmware to it and not the weirdo Beta FPV firmware to it. Regardless, I've got links down in the video description if you want to pick up one of these things, and they are affiliate links. And what that means is that if you make any purchase, you want to buy this, don't want to buy this, you want to buy anything, want to buy some props, and for any time you go do your FPV shopping, click on one of my affiliate links first. I get a small commission off of whatever you buy, and that's a great way for you to support the channel, and it doesn't cost you anything extra. If you are interested in getting into Express LRS and you're feeling a little overwhelmed, I've also got some tutorials about setting up and flashing Express LRS, and I'll put links to those in the video description as well. Thanks so much for watching. Happy flying. What are you doing in here? The least you could do is subscribe or join my Patreon or, like, just here's another video I picked out for you. Jeez.
This reminds me, if some of you might remember a few years back, this had a little bit of a feel of that Happy Model Tiny Trainer that broke really quickly. I think I actually clipped a prop on a tree and nearly broke an arm off, and as I was flying it back because of the wobbles, the arm did break off. That's not to say anything negative about this, but it was immediate when I saw it out of the box. I was like, man, that looks like a little bit of a Tiny Trainer. The Tiny Trainer was bigger though, and it ran, I think it was 65mm prop, so grossly different altogether. I do think they've used some quality carbon here, or surely I would have broken something on one of those hits that I had. Also, I just noticed I may have lost the screw out of the back. Has anybody else seen another video where that screw, maybe there's nothing to screw it into, so they just left it out? It sure looks like it should have a screw. At any rate, so the other screws are, as you can tell with the hole that we just looked at, we've got to cut out so that they sit nice and flat, but we don't have that here out on the motors. The other thing I would kind of like to see changed is also a little bit of that, my favorite tape, my motor wire tape that I'm always talking about to secure those down, because as I got hung up in greenery or I crashed, I did find that those come up, and if I can't even get my finger in there. Let me grab a tool. You can see that there's potential that it gets in the prop line. We have enough wire length there where it can get in the prop line. So I would put a little bit of tape, or if you don't like the tape that I oftentimes am always talking about, use your own tape. Just secure them down a little bit. I guess another thing that we always have to talk about with these frames is when you do get hung up in trees, this has some tiny spots that something could go through because it doesn't have the traditional, quads in general, to me, feel like grappling hooks when it comes to getting hung up in trees. They find a way. We've got all these spaces that the props can grab a hold if you're running tri-blades or quad blade props that, branches and stuff can get hung up in there. But we also have these spots that a little tiny branch could get into. Yeah, it wasn't a problem. I got stuck in the Japanese maple just off the patio once, but it was only about 3 foot off the ground, so not a big deal there. Yeah, fun little quad. Let's take a look at the price here. Right now, I'm just looking at the posting on Flywoo's website. They have a whole bunch of different options, but if I select the SPI FrSky, it's $99.99. If I go over to the ELRS, it'll be $114.99, so $15 more. And if you go to Banggood, I have got a special coupon that I just received tonight for 8% off. And it is good through the end of the year, so even if you're not interested in this, you can use that coupon. It's BG Nick Burns, 8% off is what you get. You can only use it 10 times. So as an individual, if you place 10 orders, then you've gotten all your % off as far as the use of my codes, and it has a maximum of 50 uses per day. So if 51 of you try to use that code, the 51st person, it won't work. You'll have to wait till the next day. Whether that day turns over at the 24-hour period at nighttime with China time or local time, I just don't know. That just came out tonight. But you can save 8% off of this over at Banggood if Banggood doesn't have it. Right now, though, I see it on the Flywoo website. So let me know what you think. I like Little Guys. I'm very biased. Hopefully you come to this channel and you know that I like most micros, as long as they don't break easy and they fly reasonably well. Even with the kind of default tune on this,
everyone. Today we're going to go through the process of updating the Happy Model Express LRS ES24TX Lite module. This is the module that comes for the Jumper T Lite, excuse me. And we're also going to flash an EP2 receiver. The EP1s and EP2s both have Wi-Fi on them, so we'll be doing Wi-Fi updating in those two cases. With the PP1, you can use Betaflight pass-through or other methods. I'm not going to go into that right now because it just seems like the EP1 and the EP2 should be the most popular receivers, especially if you're a micro guy. The EP2 with this ceramic antenna, you get still great range, you get the fast response, the fast packet rates, you get everything you need. Now we've already got a video on updating OpenTX to a nightly to get the packet rate to 500 hertz. So if you haven't seen that, I'll go ahead and link it down in the video description. Yeah, you can watch that in all its glory. So the first thing that we're going to do is update the TX module, and we are going to use the Express LRS configurator to do that. But to do that, we need to get up to the desktop. And as you can see here, this is the Express LRS wiki pages, and this is the configurator setup. So we need to download the one that we need. In our particular case, we are going to, well, for me, not in our particular case, because I don't know everyone who's watching this, we're going to download the exe file for a Windows-based computer. That's the one you'll download, and you'll install it. And then when that is done and launched, you'll have the Express LRS configurator right here up here. So as you can see, this auto-populates. You may have to update this configurator at some point in time. Note that I'm running 0.52. You may need a different version for whatever your reasons are. And as you can see here, we've got various releases and release candidates. Right now we're at 1RC8, and that is the one I'm going to be working with today. I'm going to go ahead and select our target. So we're using Happy Model stuff. And we're going to go all the way down here, Happy Model, 2.4 gigahertz. And we want to make sure we're doing the EX. So just as the product says, ES24TX. 24 is the 2400 gigahertz. And TX is the module, and we're going to update it via Wi-Fi, so I select that. I'm going to go down here, and I'm going to select all these options. You may have different purposes, so it's always important to consult with either the Discord or the wiki pages for Express LRS and read about these things to decide if it's something that is for you or not. Could depend a little bit, and if you're using this on any other radio or hardware, you definitely want to check. And also note that I am using a binding phrase, so you can skip that or not have that. I don't know why you would, but if you still wanted to go through the process of powering the receiver on multiple times in order to skip the binding process, you have to take this out. You can't have the binding phrase, so you won't get a binding procedure if you're using a binding page, so don't expect that. It uses this binding phrase to communicate between the receiver and the transmitter, and then it's a broadcast, so they see each other, then they link up. Also note that this is not secret. It's just like any other wireless networking sort of broadcast message. It can be picked up on others, so don't use things like your social security card number or your mother's birthday, what have you. It's not secret. Don't use a secret thing. So we're going to build, and this can take a while, especially if it's your first time. It'll go through a process of maybe even downloading other components that you might need to build your particular hardware. And then you're going to see the log file here kind of build up over time. We can no longer see the progress bar, but you see it's already done. In my case, because I've done this several times, it's already done. And it opens this window for us, and probably the most important thing to do is to rename it. We want to make sure we get the name correct. So in my case, again, it is the ES24TX. You can even put Happy Model in front of that, and I'm going to put RC8 in the name as well, so I know what release candidate it is. And that way, when I go back and I look at this firmware, I know exactly what I've got. And then I'm going to move it into a directory. You'll want to keep track of this directory for your own purposes. Now, instead of going back and leaving the Express LRS configurator, I'm going to go back and I'm going to build the firmware file for my receiver as well. So I go back to the target selection here, and I've got the EP2400RX. That is my receiver that I'm going to be using. And note, it doesn't say EP2. EP1 and EP2 are essentially the same. They're using the same chipset. It's just a different antenna on those two particular ones. I'm going to select Wi-Fi. I'm going to use, again, the binding phrase, the same one I used on my TX. That's important. We need to have it be the same. Obviously, we don't have use diversity because it only has one antenna on here. And again, these are all the different options for our receiver. You can select the same things I'm using, but you may have different purposes. I did change the auto Wi-Fi interval to 30 seconds rather than 20 seconds. Just takes a little bit longer to get to that. That's a personal preference of mine. It gives me a moment to fumble around before it goes into Wi-Fi mode. You know, like maybe I forget to turn on my radio. Maybe I can get my radio on in under 30 seconds rather than 20 seconds. So that's why I've chose that. Really no reason there. So we're going to go and do a build again. We see the progress bar. And again, if you're doing this for the first time, it's going to take longer. So just have your patient pants on and keep your eagle eyes on the screen, and it will go through the log process and compiling everything that's needed for that firmware in order to be able to flash. And here you see that we've already done, and it's opened the directory for me here. So we've got another firmware here. I'm going to rename it. So I'm going to put EP2, and I'm going to put that it is RC8. Make sure I can easily read that. And now I'm going to place it in the same directory that I put the other ones in. So the next step is back here on the desk. We need to turn on our radio. Make sure you've got a good charged battery in your jumper T light. I've got the Amber sound packs on, of course, and I get the test warning because I am running a nightly of OpenTX. I hit a button, and then I hit the long sys key. You need to have the Lua script on your SD card in the script tools scripts directory. So I long press that, and if I go down here to number 8, you see the ELRS, and then I hit enter. It comes up down here. We go down, 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 and then we go to Wi-Fi update. That's how we're going to update our file. You can see now it says it go to HTTP 10.0.0.0.1. First thing we have to do back here on the desktop is to connect to that wireless. Now I'm on a desktop, so I've got a wired connection, but you see here I've also got a wireless connection. I'm going to click on the ExpressLRS TX module. Nice name, makes it pretty easy. Go ahead and connect. Now I have seen this time out and fail. So one of the things that I did was I brought up a command prompt, and because it goes to 10.0.1, I can just use the up key, and I know I'm getting a response, so I'm good to go there. Now I go back to my browser, and I'm going to go to this page, which I already have this in, and I'm going to hit enter, and it comes to our ExpressLRS update page. So we're going to browse to the file that we just put in. Now we want to make sure we get the TX file. We don't want to flash a receiver firmware to our TX, so we select open and then update. Now again, we have to be patient, but we don't have any sort of on-screen sort of alert to what's going on. As long as the browser indicates that it's working, continue to let it work, and we'll surely get down to the end where it just says update OK, which I now have. So my TX module is now updated. We're going to go ahead and turn that off for the time being. So I'm going to back out of this, and I'm going to turn this off. The next part is our receiver, and in our case, or in my case, I've had to do this a few times so far. It's good practice for me though. I'm going to use kind of a switch and a circuit, and I've got a goggle battery out here. It's a little bit cumbersome to get everything on screen, but I'm going to plug in my battery. I've also got a fan here just off screen, so that's going to cause some audio noise, hopefully not too much, because I do find that these get pretty dadgum warm. It's very, very small, so heat dissipation is hard for these things. And of course, it's got Wi-Fi that it's creating, as well as just doing the other things that it does as a receiver. So I want to keep it cool, so bear with me here while I have a fan that cools this. So I turn my little switch. By the way, this was made for me and sent to me some time ago by another viewer. I apologize, I can't remember who sent it to me. I'm sure if I saw the name again today that it would dawn on me, but in the moment I can't think of who it is. I think you can buy these from other sources as well. So I've powered on the receiver, and now I have to wait until it goes to Wi-Fi mode. Turn that around so we can see the LED nice and easy. It'll go to a really flash blinking mode in generally somewhere around 20 to 30 seconds. And when it goes real fast, then we're going to connect our wireless on our desktop to the Wi-Fi access point. There we go. Now it's flashing super fast. I'm going to turn on my fan. Hopefully you can continue to hear this. I'm going to try to blow it away from the microphone just to keep it cool. I apologize if you can hear some noise. I have got a youngster who is practicing for a dance recital coming up. So I found the Express LRS RX module, and I'm going to connect to that. Now I have found that sometimes this goes through checking network requirements, and this can stay up here for a while. So what I do is I go back to my command prompt, and I see if I get a ping response. I am, so I'm going to go to my browser. I'm going to take out the update section. I don't need that, and I'm just going to hit enter. Now I'm ready to flash the firmware on the receiver. I'm going to browse to the file. I've got my EP2 file. I'm going to select open and update. And again, as long as the browser is working, then you're good to go. And we have updating success, and it says rebooting. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the receiver now. I'm going to turn off my fan. Excuse me while I interrupt here. I made it kind of a strong point, but not strong enough in my opinion. The fact that we need to make sure we select the right file when we're flashing really anything. But in my case, because I was rapidly going through my receivers, I had that bag I showed earlier in the video. I had done 3 before the video, and then I did my 4th during the course of this video. And then afterwards, I did 4 more. And in 2 cases, one case, I'm pretty certain I selected the TX or the transmitter external module firmware and flashed it to one of the receivers. So, of course, that didn't work out so well. In the other case, I think I may have turned off the receiver using my little switch mechanism before it was done rebooting. I can't claim on that second one. I'm very certain about that. That's just kind of my intuition. But my reason for stepping in here is the fact that if you happen to have a flash that goes wrong and it doesn't work, in my case, I got a solid light as soon as I got power onto the receiver. It would just be solid. It wouldn't flash, nothing. You're not dead in the water. In my case, I had some very good Discord help from Deadbite and PI Engineer. Thank you both very much. I sure appreciate your help. Really helped in such a straightforward and very customer service sort of matter that made you think that, you know, you had paid some sort of contract on some piece of technology and these people were here to help you. So outstanding support. They were able to help me walk through using my FTDI in order to get it into bootloader mode and recover these 2 receivers and flash them successfully. I just happen to have that FTDI adapter around. It's really, you can have a cable or a board or anyways, it connects USB and then some wires or pins depending upon what kind you have. But just know that it's probably, if you've got a wide fleet of these quads and you're going to be flashing a lot of these receivers, that having an FTDI is going to probably be a useful tool. You can get them for around $10. The one I got, I think I found for $8 or $9 off of eBay or AliExpress. But I'll put a link to it down in the video description. But know that if you run into problems, there is a very good group of people over in the Express LRS Discord. And to name them once again, Deadbite and PI Engineer, they helped me out, and I very much appreciate how they went about it and the help that they provided. On with the rest of the video. Now, because we've used the passphrase for binding, I should be able to turn on my radio. Amber tells me welcome. I'm going to get my warning, hit button, and without doing anything else, if I power this up, yes, hopefully you heard Amber RSSI critical. I've got things pretty close together, but I've got a solid LED on our receiver, our EP2. I'm going to go ahead and plug in the flight controller here to USB and bring up Betaflight. Connect to Betaflight here. And I'm going to go to the receiver tab, and you can see I'm getting all the proper movement on my receiver, even my 3-position switch, which is a setting that we looked at back at the configurator. So that is really it. I know this feels like a daunting process of having to flash stuff, but it's like a lot of things in this hobby that once we've done it a time or two, it tends to be old hat. Many of you might remember flashing. Yes, thank you, Amber. I turned off the receiver. Many of you might remember flashing Clean Flight, or the first time you tried to bind a receiver on how cumbersome that it was. These things in this hobby can be a pain. And if you're not aware of where to buy the Happy Model ES24TX or the EP1 receiver, which is my favorite super mic receiver, weighs about a gram, less than a gram. It's tiny. Put this thing in a whoop, you wouldn't even know it. These are quickly becoming some of my favorite hardware. That's why I've gone to the effort and making sure that I can kind of show how this stuff works as best as I can. Probably because I'm going to be using it a lot on future quads. I will elaborate here just a touch, not to stretch out the video, but in order to use these receivers, we do need to have a free what we call UART. So we need to have an RX and a TX pad available on our board, and they do need to be the same. So if you're using RX1, we need to have TX1. There are certain all-in-one boards that don't have both an RX1 and a TX1, or an RX1 and a an RX2 and a TX2. So we need to have both sides, the RX side and the TX side, free for that particular UART number. So if you have a free RX1 and a free TX2, I don't think that'll work. That's one stipulation about using these receivers, just like with Crossfire and other more exotic receivers that we've seen in the past. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the comment section below. I appreciate your time. And thanks for watching. Hello everyone, today we're taking a look at two Happy Model products and Express LRS. And inside this little Whoop is a 1S all-in-one flight controller with an Express LRS receiver in there. If you're not familiar with Express LRS, I've done a previous video or two. Basically, this is an open source project that a community of really talented people have come up with ways of improving our range and being able to use other hardware for the purposes of our hobby, and that link control, and they're getting kick you in the crotch, spit on your neck, fantastic results. It's a Friends reference, by the way. But let me see if I can get this lined up. Right here, you should see, once the camera focuses, that little ceramic antenna. Yeah, that's what it's got on there. And I'll take this out here in just a minute, but I've got some flight footage of this that I'll show you. And something else that I was impressed about this all-in-one, it runs a 200 milliwatt VTX. And as you're watching that footage that I'll start playing when we go down to the desk, pay attention to the range on that 200 milliwatts. I was surprised. So not only do we have outstanding control link with Express LRS, but we're also getting some pretty good video performance out of this little guy. So maybe a couple compelling reasons to look at this all-in-one flight controller. Also, we're taking a look at the ES24TX Lite. Yes, I said light there at the end because it is specific to the Jumper T Lite. Don't buy this ES24TX Lite and expect it to work on your X Lite. They have one coming out for the X Lite, and that will be next month. If you can't wait and you have the knowledge and skill set, maybe you can make this work on the X Lite, changing the pinouts, stuff of that nature, but that's not what this is intended for. It's intended for the Jumper T Lite radio. And we'll take a quick peek at that. We're really not going to dive deep into that. They've got pictures and tutorials, and I'm going to make a separate video about flashing the firmware on this and binding it up. So for now, let's get down to the desk and I'll take apart the little Mobula and we'll take a closer look at that all-in-one board. And by the way, if you're looking for a standard size module and Express LRS, Happy Model got a product for that. I had that video out maybe a month ago. I'll link that in the top right-hand corner of your screen, which is probably over here actually. And you can watch that video if you want to. The short order of Express LRS is it is competing, or it has the longest possible range. Wesley Vardy, he has got a great channel testing the range on Express LRS, and he has gotten, I think it was 33 kilometers out without failsafe. Not necessarily on this hardware with Express LRS. So if you're interested in range test results, I would highly encourage you to look for Wesley Vardy's, and that is Wesley with a Z in the Wesley Vardy's channel. He does a lot of range testing. But I'll put a link to the video down in the video description as well if you're interested in looking at the full-size module, which will probably cover a majority of the larger radios, if not all of them altogether, and even some of the smaller ones too. So as we get started, I'm going to play that footage over in that corner, and again, I was pretty impressed with not only the link quality, which is outstanding, but the video reception is actually quite good. I go way up the street, get at least one house between me and the quad, as well as various vegetation, trees, etc. Maybe even two houses, depending upon the angle that the quad's at the time. I go around my house, I go around my neighbor's house. On 200 milliwatt, that's pretty dang good. So I'm impressed. Of course, this is a sample of one. Who knows what sample of many might result in. But let's take a closer look here at the board for those of you that really want to see how it looks and how it mounts. And yes, This is the front of the board now, so our pigtail has changed locations. Everything's kind of been rotated. We still have our USB port here too as well. So that's something to be aware of. You can change this. You can turn that back around, and then in Betaflight you can use the controls in order to rotate on the yaw axis 180 degrees to return it what we're used to. Old time grizzled veterans might want that pigtail out the back, but as of right now, it's out the front. And Happy Model has been working with Phobos, one of the lead developers or one of the major players within the development of Express LRS, in order to accomplish not only this board but the TX as well as the Betaflight version that's on here. And the Betaflight version that's on here isn't officially supported, but hopefully in the coming weeks we'll see some commits to Betaflight to where it will be officially supported. Right now you get an odd message anytime you plug it into Betaflight, telling you need to do various things to make it work, which you don't. But something else that's interesting about this is the binding procedure. Now you can use, if you've got receivers, you can use passphrases and stuff like that. In this particular case where it's built in, a lot like with our SPI receivers, it used to be where you had to actually find the button on the board and press it, or you had to type in a command. Depending upon which version of Betaflight was on the board, it might just be FRSky_bind. In EMU, it's just bind. I think we also had FRSky_bind_ SPI or something like that. There's 3 or 4 different varieties of CLI commands depending upon the Betaflight or what version that you have on here. In this particular one that I'm looking at, it just has a bind button on the receiver page, which is super cool because then you start to see the flashing lights, and then you can put your radio into bind mode and it links right up. This has the ability to run, or at least the transmitter has the ability to run different packet rates as well as different milliwatts. But I should turn the board over for those of you that want to get that super fine look. Let me bring it in close to the camera and focus. And Happy Model actually does a pretty good job of creating pen maps on their website. Their website is happymodel.cn. I'll show you in the binding video how you update the firmware. Of course, you should always check the manufacturer's website, whoever the manufacturer is, for updates if you need an update. Myself, if I don't think I need an update, or I don't have a reason to have an update, not just my desire to update, but is there a problem? Can an update possibly fix that? I'll leave stuff alone. I won't bother to update it. Goes along with my, if you have a working quad, leave it alone. Don't fuss with a good working quad. Let me turn this on, and I want to show you the menu here. So I've got this about as close in as I can bring it in order for you to see it. But you see, I'm running a packet rate of 500 hertz, which is the highest supported at current time. Express LRS is developing, so things could always change there. I've also got the milliwatts at 250, which you can go higher than that as well. And you see that I'm running the RF frequency at 2.4 gigahertz. You see down here we've got bind and Wi-Fi update. To update the module, you use the Wi-Fi update. You connect to a wireless network that it says, I think it's Express LRS, but I'll make full detailed tutorial in the next video. So you connect to the Express LRS Wi-Fi AP access point that you see, and then you open your web browser and you type 10.0.0.1. That brings you to the website for the module, and then you just select the file to update it, and that comes from the Happy Model website. You also need to have an SD card in your radio, and you need to use the Express LRS backup here, Lua script that you see right there in the top of mine. So if I hit enter on that, then you get this menu. First time you do the updating, a little tip, you'll get a warning on screen. So if you get yours before I get my video out, just know that you'll get a video or a message on the T-Lite that gives you a warning, and one of your options is to force. Go ahead and select force. That then fires up the wireless of the module, and then you'll be able to connect to it. And then you'll do an update, and everything will be easy peasy from that point. I was really pleased with the experience of binding and using this. The module itself, this housing is metal. I don't know if it's, maybe I can, it's metal. I wouldn't suggest messing with these jumpers on the back unless you know what you're doing or Happy Model has told you to. for support purposes. We of course have a USB port down here that could probably be used for programming updates if you needed to program through that interface. This module connects very similarly to how Jumper wants any module back here to connect, although this does not use the little plastic bit that's on the back. They have good pictures on their website of how you go about it. It's pretty simple. You open the two halves of the shell. You go in with this little power module board. You stick that to the back of the radio, the actual radio module. And I do suggest sticking that up a little higher. There is a software piece, not software, excuse me, a softer foam piece that's in the back shell of the radio that's round. And if you mount that little connector too low, you'll find that that foam has to squish harder. I mounted mine in that location, so I'm advising you mount it a little higher than you think you should need to, so that software bit that's part of the radio will clear your wires. And it's really plug and play. You plug in the wires as you see in the pictures on their website. That's why I didn't create new ones. I thought that theirs were fine and mine weren't going to probably be much better. And, it's a small radio. They're small connections, so it is a little bit fussy. But as far as just plugging stuff in, not a big deal. It also comes with screws to mount this to the back of the radio, as well as all the screws you need to have two halves. I think the hardest part for me was the thermal paste. There is what looks like a sticker that is thermal paste that this comes with, and that goes between this base layer and then the actual module that's inside here. That thermal paste kind of can create some thoughts of, oh no, it's going to overheat. Well, in my experience of flying it, mainly indoors, because again, I've had a lot of rain recently. I've been flying this pretty much daily indoors since I got it working. So I've had a number of flights on it, and I noticed this casing getting warm to the touch. We keep our house relatively cool. We keep it around 68 degrees, and this casing is warm to the touch. It's not the sort of warmth where you think, oh, that's going to hurt me or anything. It's dissipating heat. It's doing what it's supposed to do. I think they do have future plans for other modules and having a built-in fan, but that will be for the X-Lite sort of radios that can probably supply more power, so they can use the fan in order to help dissipate some of that heat. But heat might be an issue in high degree areas, like if you're in Texas, Arizona, if it's 115 degrees and you're out flying. One, I'd be surprised if you're out flying it's 115 degrees. And then running this module kind of just continuously. So the thermal paste was the fussiest part. I'd just be dainty with it. It's not super hardy. You can tear it fairly easily, but we just want to make sure we get that thermal paste on between the module and the metal bracket here, because it helps to conduct heat all over the place. The antenna that we've got on here certainly isn't impressive. Let me take that off. It looks like it's just cut off. It doesn't look like it's a manufactured antenna, like they took an antenna and just cut the ends of it off. I suppose it works, but both ends look that way. Let me refocus the camera here, zoom in a touch. So, wasn't impressed with that, but I guess form over function. What else are we supposed to do? But that was something else I noticed. Hopefully it's the correct length where you get the best reception, but if it is not, the antenna is replaceable, and it does have the pin down in the connector there. Let me get these back on. Last bit here would be for anybody who's not familiar, whenever you have something transmitting, if it's a radio or a VTX, make sure you have your antennas on before you power them on. That is a quick way to burn out a chip or something of that nature if you don't have this connected. That's just a kind of a first-time warning there. Always have your antennas on anything that transmits. Receivers can do a lot better without their antennas. Transmitters, they need their antenna. And in closing, I'll put the links to these products down in the video description. Hopefully these come to a lot of different shops, so we can get these a lot of different places. I think if you have a T-Lite and you like micros, it's really hard to pass up on this. I think one of the questions that I probably haven't answered is, with that higher packet rate, can I tell a difference? I'm hesitant to say, but this is a fresh Whoop that I was flying around, and I haven't been flying a fresh Whoop in a while. It does feel a touch more attached or crisp when you fly it. But that's just my perception. It could be completely a placebo of having a new product. I've flown Express LRS on other quads, but this particular one, it did feel a little bit crisper. Of course, I fly most of my micros with my Jumper T-Lite. Sometimes I'm using other radios with larger quads. Here on the micro channel, I don't go much above. I've done a couple of 4-inchers, but I haven't flown a 5-inch quad in 3-4 years. And I think this changes things. I think it fixes one major problem in micros, which I'm super happy about, is control link. Control link has been a problem with SPI, especially when using the FrSky protocol. FrSky has not played well with D8 mode. We have a lot of people who have gone through a lot of troubles and a lot of heartache that have tried to connect to SPI receivers using newer FrSky radios. And FrSky just doesn't seem to be interested in at least our niche. I know some of you are going to disagree with me, but when it comes to micros and our receivers that we traditionally use, even the RXSR and the XM Plus, some of them are shipping with the new firmware, so you have to go through the process of flashing. The customer doesn't want to necessarily do that unless they just like to do that sort of stuff, which from what I'm reading and hearing is pretty rare. And this fixes that problem. Express LRS, open source project. It's open source hardware. You don't have to buy the Happy Model stuff. You can roll your own. The components are out there on the internet. There's a great Discord channel that Express LRS has got going. My understanding from speaking to a number of people who have joined that Discord is that the group that are running this project are very helpful and friendly, and there's not any cutthroat or nastiness going on. And so that helps if you want to create your own. Maybe you want to build your own all-in-one board with Express LRS. Knock yourself out, I sure wouldn't. I don't have that sort of knowledge on what would need to happen there, but this will fix that major problem of control link in micros. Happy Model is working on a 2S version of this board, or they said they're going to be working on it, or they are working on it. I can't be certain which it is. And as of right now, the 2S version of this board probably won't have a VTX. Maybe that'll change by the time we see it. Maybe it won't. My preference, of course, again, being microcentric and having some builds where I'm wanting to, cut nearly every gram I can. If we could get a 200 milliwatt VTX on here on the 2S version, I think that would make a lot of people happy, including myself. So coming up here in the next few days, hopefully, I will have the binding procedure for Express LRS and this all-in-one flight controller, and I'll be able to help you make sure that you can get connected and have the same flying fun that I've been having. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the comments section below. I appreciate your time. Thanks for watching. Hello, everyone. Hopefully you have something planned for your weekend. It's potentially a long holiday for some people with Juneteenth and Father's Day. Hopefully I get this out before then. And I hope you all have the opportunity to enjoy Father's Day with your father, or if you're a father yourself, or otherwise just go out and do something fun and enjoy. Maybe fly some quads. But in today's video, we are going to look at the Flywoo Nano Baby V2. This is the DC version, which is more focused on flight time and flat cruising, exploratory sort of flight, less prop and view in this one. And the FR version, which is more freestyle focused. But I also think there's an opportunity to create some different drones out of, well, it is going to take a little bit of a different carbon fiber. And I've got some improvements that I can suggest for Flywoo on this version, as well as potential new drone that might be kind of fun. Let's start with the DC version. The first thing they've done is they've changed the camera a little bit. This is a V3 of the Flywoo Nano camera. This one has a larger lens to it, as you can see there, which does limit any potential camera angle. Pretty much, this is the camera angle you're going to get, and you're not going to get anything else. Camera angle does look adjustable, but as I said, it's pretty much locked in place if you use this canopy. They did also redesign the canopy. Previously, it was kind of just one sort of loop, which now have legs out here to the other mount points. The flight controller down here is the ultralight all-in-one with Express LRS, and it is an F411. And the receiver is actually external, so you can update that freely to whatever version of Express LRS you need to have to match to your Express LRS radio. On this particular version, they also have the Robo 1002 and 19,800 kV motors with 40 millimeter tri-bladed props. And just like the Freestyle version, this one can come with HD versions as well, which is HD0 as well as Walk Snail. In my video, you'll only see the analog version with the DC frame. I failed to mention, but the VTX, which is built into the all-in-one flight controller, is power switchable up to 250 milliwatts. The Freestyle version is very, very similar. Of course, we have, in my case, the Walk Snail video system. You can also get this with HD0 for digital, or you can get it for analog as well, which would be similar to this, just with a different frame. The motors are the 1002 23,500 kV motors with quad-bladed 40 millimeter props. And both versions come with the new G&B connector, which is called A30, and it's not 100% compatible with all other G&B 27 connectors. So your new A30 batteries will connect to these as well as your previous G&B 27, but your G&B 20.
Okay, listen up. You really don't want to miss this. Click the link in the description right now.
Alright, so in this video we're checking out the Avion RC Icon 2.5. So this is a 2.5 inch prop micro quad with the DJI O3 air unit. This is a built-in, Alright, so we're checking out the half mile baseline in this video. This is a 2-inch 2S micro. I think in my previous video on the NanoFly 20, I think I mentioned this as a 2S or a 2-inch 1S micro, but it's actually a 2S micro. So much a bigger setup here, bigger motors, obviously 2S battery, so the performance is going to be quite a bit different from the NanoFly. But if you're looking for something a little bit more beefy, with of course weight penalty, it's obviously going to be heavier. Anyway, so let's take a look at what comes in the box. It comes in this little plastic carrying case. Doesn't come with any batteries. I'll talk about the battery situation here in a second. So you get 2 of these battery trays that goes on the bottom. You have to install these yourself, but they don't come installed. I'll show you that here in a second. It's not a big deal. You get a spare one here. It's just 3D printed CPU, spare canopy, and I believe this is for like a RunCam split. So if you happen to have like one of those boards from the Mobile 7 HD, Mobile 6 HD, I think this is the same canopy, and you can transfer that camera over to this one to make it an HD setup if you want. Get some stickers, of course, at the bottom there. Get a bag with some spare props, prop removal tool, some spare nuts and screws, screwdriver, Allen wrench, and extra battery pads. So this little battery tray here on the bottom, you have to take off these nuts that are on the screw, and then just slide on the battery tray on here. It's a 3D printed part, and then put the nuts back on. Takes like 5 minutes. The recommended battery is this 2S 450 GMB high volt, and it does fit in here, although it's a very, very tight fit. There are other batteries that they said that could be used, a 350, 450, 550, 650. Of course, those probably won't fit this tray exactly. Like this one does, it's a very tight fit, even with the 450. I didn't have a 350, so I did try a 300 2S. This one also fits in here, no problem. It's a bit looser, but it doesn't slide out. It's a little bit looser fit. Flight times are going to be quite a bit different. 4 minutes to 4.5 minutes if you're flying kind of slower. Maybe even 5 minutes if you're really just cruising around on the 450. The 300 is not going to give you that much if you're pretty aggressive, which I think you're going to want to be because it's going to have a better power to weight ratio with this lighter setup here. Looking at a minute and a half, 2 minutes, maybe 2.5 minutes of flight time on the 300, depending on how aggressively you're flying. And so we have a 2-inch micro. We have 1103 motors in this one here. These EX1103, 11,000 kV motors. Got the gem fan, tri-bladed 2-inch props. The board on here is their X12 board, and this one is the Express LRS version. You can see the little ceramic antenna on board there. 12 amp ESCs. It has a built-in Express LRS receiver, It's got the Betaflight 4.3 something firmware with the version 2 Express LRS on here. So if you want the version 3, you'll have to go to the website and get the updated Betaflight firmware to get this to Express LRS version 3. But that's a DIY project. You have to do that on your own. And it does come with an onboard Open VTX 400 milliwatt video transmitter. Of course, this is analog, so you get a single board for all that. For your camera, you get your Caddx Ant analog camera and this canopy, and then your VTX antenna comes out the top here. The bottom plate frame that holds everything is about 2 millimeters thick, and then of course the motors that are being held on with 3 screws here, although is also a 4-screw mount if you have a different motor and if you want to try a different motor out. And of course you have their plugs for the motors, pretty typical half mile, along with a micro USB port here pointing out at the bottom. Alright, so this is how much the drone weighs. It's a little over 40 grams, 40.6 grams on my scale, and then with the recommended battery, the 2S450, the total weight's at 68.4. If you go with a lighter 300, the weight comes in at 60.1. So if I didn't mention it before, this is called the Baseline, and this is a design inspired by Nathan Loops. I think he's one of the Happy Model team pilots, and I guess this is one of his favorite models that he's been flying around for some time, so they decided to make a bind and fly model out of it. I think they did go with a bigger motor setup, obviously for heavier setup, 1103 motors. And if you kind of compare this to like the Flywoo Baby Nano 20, which is very similar to this one, that one comes with 1002 motor, so it's a much smaller motor on a biblade 2-inch prop. So it doesn't have as much acro performance as this one, but that one weighs a little bit less. So if you're looking for more acro performance in a 2-inch setup here, this is probably the best one with the biggest motor. Obviously, if you're looking for power and acro performance, obviously the bigger motor, the bigger battery, the better. So the question is, how does this 2-inch 2S toothpick compare to your normal traditional toothpick, the 3-inch 3S toothpick? So that usually is like a 1303.5 motor on 5,000 kV on a 3S battery. And of course, the 3-inch is going to beat this 2-inch pretty much every day, twice on Sunday. So, I'm going to get that question, how does the 2-inch compare to 3-inch? 3-inch, it's just going to be better. It's got bigger prop, more power, 3S battery. It's just going to be better than a 2-inch and 2S setup. And conversely, the 2-inch 2S setup is going to still beat out a 2-inch 1S setup or a 2-inch 2S setup with a smaller motor. So, if you're comparing this one to the Flywoo, this one's better than the Flywoo, and then the Flywoo is better than the one from Sub 250, the one I just reviewed recently, the NanoFly 20. Of course, at the same time, we each sort of downgrade. Smaller motor, smaller battery, less battery. The overall weight is going to be less. The noise is going to be less, of course. So it kind of really depends on what you're looking for and what your priorities are. So if you're looking for, ultimate power and performance, obviously you want to go as big as possible and just get a 5-inch. 5-inch on 6S. That's going to give you the best performance out of anything you want to be flying FPV. But of course, in a micro, this is a pretty good package. If you want to go take the next step up, you can move it to a 2.5-inch toothpick or a 3-inch toothpick. Those have already come out, and there's plenty of videos of those on my channel already. But yeah, this kind of fills out a little bit of a gap there, and that's sort of between the 3-inch toothpick and the 2-inch toothpicks are not as much power. This one kind of fills in that little gap where you're kind of looking for a little bit more performance. This one fills that gap in pretty nicely. Now this version is Express LRS. It does come in a SPI FreeSky version and a FlySky version on the flight controller. Of course, it's a built-in receiver. Only comes in analog right now. Probably would be too hard to convert this to Walksnail or HD0. You just have to add the video transmitter board, and this will mount here. You probably need a longer screw to mount the extra board, and then you need a spacer, the rubber grommets to mount those. But it probably isn't going to be too hard. You just have to find the longer screws to do that. So of course it comes with a pretty decent pin tune out of the box. I think Happy Model has kind of gone the other direction, where they're really pushing sort of the limits of their pit tune. So I think on mine the flight controller is kind of screwed on a little bit too tight, so I get there's a fair amount of prop wash oscillation, especially on hard turns on my particular setup. I think it's just because the flight controller might be screwed on a little bit tighter than probably the one that they actually tune. So they obviously build one, they tune it, and then probably that one had their flight controller a little bit less screwed down. And so mine being a little bit more screwed on probably has a little bit more vibrations because of that. It's not terrible, just something I noticed. Obviously I could probably tinker with the tune or tinker with the tightness of the screws on the flight controller. Those are things.
Zollquart, ist leise, ist klein, ist nicht so gefährlich. Perfekt, um damit den Hinterhof zu finden. Zoll ist leise, zwei rote Halter für die Batterie aus DPU-Kunststoff. Der Halter wird unten an die zwei Schrauben festgeschraubt und eignet sich für die meisten Akkus, wie jetzt hier der Tattoo 2S Akku mit 450 mAh. Oder so ein GNB mit 520 mAh, der hier auch noch reinpasst. Ich habe hier noch einen Airline Akku mit 550 mAh und der passt aber dann leider nicht mehr rein. Der 2 Zoll Quad wiegt gerade mal 40 Gramm und mit einem Akku bin ich unter 70 Gramm. Der größere GNB-Akku wiegt genauso wie der kleine Tattoo-Akku. Die neuen GNB-Akku haben 530 mAh. Leider schwer in Deutschland zu bekommen. Also verwende ich hier den Tattoo 450 mAh Akku. Außerdem gibt es noch eine HD-Haube, die keiner gebrauchen kann. Jetzt machen wir den ersten Flug mit dem Bassline, meine Radiomaster TX16S Funker und der Ishin FPV-Brille. Der kleine, super leichte 2 Zoll Quad hat ordentlich Power, mehr als man eigentlich braucht. Den kannst du wunderbar im Garten oder auf einer kleinen Wiese extrem schnell fliegen. Ich fliege hier mit 25 Milliwatt, das reicht auf der kleinen Wiese vollkommen aus und für den Frühling ist das ein richtig schöner FPV-Racer. Es macht vor allem viel Spaß, tief zu fliegen und es gelingen alle Freestyle-Kunststücke. Er fliegt sich viel leichter als ein 5 Zoll Quad, ist leise, ist klein, ist nicht so gefährlich wie ein 5 Zoll Quad und eigentlich stört sich keiner an den kleinen 40 Gramm FPV-Racer. Außerdem lohnt sich so ein kleiner 2 Zoll Quad viel besser zum Üben als ein 5 Zoll Quad. Macht man hier einen Fehler, dann kann fast gar nichts passieren. Dann fliegt man mit dem Happy Model Bassline einfach weiter. Dann muss man nicht Angst haben, dass man den Quad kaputt macht oder andere Gegenstände, die im Weg liegen. Die KTX Handkamera liefert ein sauberes Bild, ist aber nicht so gut wie das Bild der Ratel 2 Kamera. Mit dem Tattoo 450 mAh Akku komme ich ungefähr auf 3 bis 3,5 Minuten Flugzeit. Mit dem GNB Akku bin ich vielleicht 20 Sekunden länger unterwegs. Würde man langsamer fliegen, kommt man vielleicht ungefähr an maximal 4 Minuten Flugzeit. Der Bassline besteht nur aus 2 Komponenten, also eigentlich nur die Platine hier unten und die Kamera. Mehr gibt es hier nicht. Der Empfänger sitzt direkt hier auf dem Board. Das ist bei mir hier der Express LRS Empfänger, hier mit der kleinen Keramik Tower Antenne und genauso der Videosender ist hier integriert. Hier sieht man den Anschluss der Antenne und das ist die Videosenderantenne. Um jetzt den Happy Mode mit einer Fernsteuerung zu verbinden, findet man hier nirgendwo einen Bind-Knopf. Hier muss man tatsächlich über die USB-Schnittstelle sich mit dem Computer verbinden. Betaflight Konfigurator starten. Dort kann man den Bind-Modus aktivieren. Den Bassline mit dem Express-LRS-Empfänger kann man mit einer Radiomaste-Funker fliegen. Die Radiomaste Boxer hat hier direkt einen Express-LRS-Empfänger eingebaut, sodass ich direkt die beiden verbinden kann und losfliegen. Express-LRS kann man mit jeder anderen Funker fliegen, zum Beispiel hier auch mit der TBS Mambo, die ich eigentlich für Crossfire verwende. Also hier fliege ich mit Crossfire, tauscht man das Modul aus gegen ein, wie hier, Beta FPV Express LRS Modul. Kann man das Ganze mit Express LRS fliegen und somit benötigt man hier nicht zusätzlich noch einen Empfänger, der das Ganze noch schwerer macht. Und so kann man mit diesem Modul so kleine Quads fliegen oder als Anfänger Hoops, die dann auch mit einem Express-LRS-Modul ausgestattet sind. Geflogen bin ich mit der Ishin EV300O V2 analogen FPV-Brille. Genauso gut kann man auch eine DJI-Brille nehmen, die V1 oder die V2 mit zusätzlich einem analogen Empfänger, wie ich hier einen habe, kann ich den Happy Model Bassline über analog fliegen. Happy Model Bassline ist ein toller 2 Zoll Quad, mit dem jeder viel Spaß haben wird. Schade, dass der nur analog ist. Heute fliege ich lieber digital, weil man einfach auf meinen selbstgebauten 2 Zoll Quad habe. Der ist digital, der ist noch analog und den genauso leicht ist, hat gleiche Gewicht, ist aber voll digital. Und das kann man realisieren. Gramm, und hier mein Klein wiegt ja ca. 40 Gramm und hier mein selbstgebauter 2 Zoll Quad hat quasi das gleiche Gewicht, ist aber voll digital. Und das kann man realisieren, indem man jetzt hier im System noch die passende Empfangseinheit, wie zum Beispiel hier so ein Modul, was man auf jeder analog Einplatinen so an die FPV-Brücke liegen. Hier hat quasi ist wie überall ein Digitalsystem, Beispiel auf meinen selbstgebauten System mit einem kann ich den analogen Empfänger, wie ich hier einen habe, kann ich den Happy Model Bassline Spaß haben wird. Schade, dass der nur analog ist. Heute fliege ich lieber digital, weil man einfach mehr sieht. Den Happy Model Bassline gibt es auch als digitale Version, also mit einer digitalen Kamera, mit einem HD0 Digitalsystem oder mit einem Wolfsnake-System, den ich hier als Beispiel auf meinen selbstgebauten 2 Zoll Quad habe. Der ist digital, der ist noch analog und den habe ich hier so kompakt gebaut und überall an Gewicht gespart, sodass jetzt mein digitale genauso leicht ist wie der analoge. Happy Model Bassline wiegt ja ca. 40 Gramm und hier macht jemand wie zum Beispiel
今天比较早出来跑，然后刚出来就有一单慢位登的，第一单是那个1连9公里，45块钱吧。你拿看。你好，Uber 的731。好的。
driver, some extra screws, and an extra canopy. In addition, you're also getting two sets of 2.5-inch propellers. The one that came assembled on the quadcopter were a set of 2.5-inch HQ props, and you're also getting a set of Emax Avan 2.5-inch propellers. As I mentioned before, in this video I'm going to test both options. In terms of specs, the Larva X features 1103 7000 kV motors, which can handle 2 and 3S LiPo batteries. The maximum size of propellers is 2.5 inch, and the motor shaft diameter is 1.5 millimeters. On the top side of the quadcopter, protected inside this molded canopy, you can find the Runcam Racer Nano 2 FPV camera. It's secured using 2 screws on the sides, and you can adjust its angle. Under the canopy, you can find the Happy Model Diamond VTX. It supports 40 channels, features smart audio using TBS Smart Audio Protocol, and it has a selectable output strength of 25, 100, and 200 millivolts. This VTX also features a 720p DVR, so you can insert a micro SD card over here, and by default the camera is going to start recording, and you have to remember to stop the recording procedure before disconnecting the battery, because otherwise the recorded file is not going to be saved, so you can find the start and stop button over here. The second button allows you to change the frequency and the output power, but of course the easiest way to configure this VTX is to use the Smart Audio feature. On the back of the quadcopter, sticking from the canopy, you can find a linear antenna, which is using an IPX antenna connector. Under the VTX, you can find the CrazyBee F4 Pro version 3 flight controller. It came pre-flashed with Betaflight 4.04, and it features a 10 ampere 4-in-1 BLLES ESC. The main differences between the CrazyBee F4 Pro version 3 and the version 2.1 that was bundled with the Happy Model Selpha X are that, first of all, instead of supporting up to 3S LiPo batteries, the version 3 supports up to 4S LHB batteries. In addition, it features a 10 ampere 4-in-1 ESC instead of a 5 ampere one, and I think that that's the reason a capacitor on the XT30 battery connector is no longer needed. Another minor difference between the versions is that the version 2.1 features a connector for the camera, and the version 3 doesn't feature this connector, so the VTX is soldered directly to the flight controller. Just like its predecessors, the CrazyBee F4 Pro version 3 comes in 2 versions. One that doesn't feature a receiver, and it means that you will need to add your own one externally, and another one which comes with either FrSky or FlySky compatible receivers. The Happy Model Larva X is currently available only as the bundle fly quadcopter, which means that it's already bundled with a radio receiver. The FrSky D8, which is also FrSky D16 compatible, and the FlySky versions are the ones that feature a flight controller with an integrated receiver, and the Crossfire DSM2 and the FrSky RXSR versions are ones that the radio receiver is connected externally. The version that I have is the one with an integrated FrSky receiver, and you should note that its radio range is very limited, and it's only about 150 meters. You can see the radio receiver antenna is over here, and in order to secure it to the front of the frame, I used some super UV light glue, and I think that this method is pretty good, and it's going to prevent the antenna from getting into the propellers. On the bottom of the quadcopter, you can find the flight controller micro USB port that will enable you to configure it, the XT30 battery connector, a piece of foam for soft mounting the battery, and a simple battery Velcro strap. The thickness of the unibody bottom plate is 2.8 millimeters. Its wheelbase is 100 millimeters. The distance between the right motor and the left one is about 70 millimeters, and the distance between the front motors and the back ones is about 70 millimeters as well, so this frame features a true X pattern. The quality of the carbon looks good, and the frame also features reinforced arms, so I don't think that it's going to break easily, and it also features these extra carbon parts over here in order to protect the motors. In terms of weight, the Larva X weighs 50.6 grams, so it's heavier than the BetaFPV HX100, which also features a 100 millimeters frame, which weighs 46.9 grams, and the Happy Model Selpha X, which weighs only 35.8 grams. It is, however, lighter than the Daton Cube, which weighs 67.3 grams, but you should note that this comparison is not very fair, since this is the 3-inch version of the Daton Cube. Setting up the quadcopter is very easy. All you have to do is to connect the micro USB port using a USB cable to your computer. You should note that when powering on the quadcopter, even through the USB port, the VTX turns on, and you should always note that an antenna needs to be connected to the ITX connector. And I also recommend to set the power output to 25 milliwatts when configuring the quadcopter on the bench, because you don't want to burn the VTX. Then when you're all set, hit connect. You'll have to make sure that everything works properly under receiver. Under the configuration tab, you can configure the mode of the receiver. So this one features an integrated receiver. So you have to make sure that SPA-RX support is chosen. If you'd like to bind your FrSky receiver on FrSky D8, FrSky D will need to be chosen. And if you want to set it to D16, you will need to select FrSky X. In addition, I changed the gyro output frequency and the PID loop frequency from 8 to 8 to 4 to 4, because now the CPU load is significantly lower. And when it was set initially to 8 and 8, the CPU load was at around 35%. Next, you need to select your modes. So you need to define an ARM switch. I set my modes to Horizon, Air mode, and when it's set in between, it's set to upper mode. I also recommend to configure the beeper, and you have to make sure under configuration that the this should be configuration is on. So you have to turn both switch to the right, and you have to select the beacon tone. And basically, this is going to enable you to use the motors as beepers. This is important because this thing is pretty small and you don't want it to get lost in the middle of the field. Under OSD, you can choose the elements that are going to be shown. I think that I only added the RSSI indication to the top left corner, and you can simply rearrange your elements in order to fit your needs. Under CLI, you can configure a VTX, and you can also perform the bind procedure. First of all, if you have a flight controller with an integrated radio receiver, you can type bind_RX_SPI, then press enter, and then the receiver is going to be set to binding mode, and then you can simply hit bind on your remote controller in order to bind your remote controller with the built-in radio receiver. Another thing that I recommend to set is the VTX, so you won't have to scan for the correct channel. So you can type get VTX. Then over here you can see all the related values. So right now the VTX frequency is 5740 and the VTX power is set to 1. 1 stands for 25 milliwatts, 2 for 100 milliwatts, and 3 for 200 milliwatts. If you'd like to set the VTX channel, for example, to channel number 3, you can type set VTX channels equals 3, enter, hit save. And now, as you can see, the VTX channel is set to 3, and the VTX frequency is 5780. Another small advice that I have for you is related to the battery Velcro strap. In case you feel that your battery is not properly secured, what I recommend you to do is just to insert it in this manner, and then flip the battery around, and as you can see, now it's better secured. The next thing that I've done is to head outdoors and test the Happy Model Larva X using both HQ Prop and Emax Avan Rush 2.5-inch propellers. The batteries that I used are the GNB 520 mAh 2S and the Happy Model 300 mAh 3S LHV batteries. The weight of the Larva X, including the 2S LHV battery, is 79.3 grams, and its weight, including the 3S LHV battery, is 76.6 grams. In terms of performance, I think that the Larva X performed great using both 2S and 3S LHV batteries and also using both types of propellers. However, I do think that it did a little bit better using the HQ Prop, and the flight time were a little bit more extended using the Emax Avan propellers. The average flight time that I got were about 4 minutes using the 3S 300 mAh LHV battery and about 5 minutes using the GNB 520 mAh 2S LHV battery. In addition, I can tell you that the onboard DVR is definitely a nice feature. It records the video at 720p 30 frames per second, and as you're about to see, its quality is definitely higher than the video that was recorded on my HDO FPV goggles. So overall, in my opinion, at the moment of shooting this video, the Happy Model Larva X is probably the best toothpick style micro brushless quadcopter that you can get. It's fun to fly, it's robust and not going to break easily, and it's suitable both for advanced and beginners. And as you're about to see, it flies very fast on 2S and flies like a rocket on 3S. The only downside that I find is that the built-in radio receiver is not great. It's pretty limited and the effective range is only about 150 meters. And if you're going to get this quadcopter, I highly recommend to get the versions with the external receiver, and then you're going to be limited by the VTX and the range is going to be extended dramatically. Now I'm going to show you the flight footage, and as always, if you have any questions about the Happy Model Larva X, feel free to ask them in the comment section down below. Don't forget to leave a thumbs up if you like this video, and consider subscribing to my channel and hitting the notifications bell. Version 3 flight controller. It came pre-flashed with Betaflight 4.04, and it features a 10 ampere 4-in-1 BLLES ESC. The main differences between the CrazyBee F4 Pro version 3 and the version 2.1 that was bundled with the Happy Model Selphy X are that, first of all, instead of supporting up to 3S like batteries, the version 3 supports up to 4S and LHD batteries. In addition, it features a 10 ampere 4-in-1 ESC instead of a 5 ampere one, and I think that that's the reason a capacitor on the XT30 battery connector is no longer needed. Another minor difference between the versions is that the version 2.1 features a connector for the camera, and the version 3 doesn't feature this connector, so the VTX is soldered directly to the flight controller. Just like its predecessors, the CrazyBee F4 Pro version 3 comes in two versions. One that doesn't feature a receiver, and it means that you will need to add your own one externally, and another one which comes with either FrSky or FlySky compatible receivers. The Happy Model Larva X is currently available only as a bundle fly quadcopter, which means that it's already bundled with a radio receiver. The FrSky D8, which is also FrSky D16 compatible, and the FlySky versions are the ones that feature a flight controller with an integrated receiver, and the Crossfire DSM2 and the FrSky RXSR versions are ones that the radio receiver is connected externally. The version that I have is the one with an integrated FrSky receiver, and you should note that its radio range is very limited, and it's only about 150 meters. You can see the radio receiver antenna is over here, and in order to secure it to the front of the frame, I used some super UV light glue, and I think that this method is pretty good, and it's going to prevent the antenna from getting into the propellers. On the bottom of the quadcopter, you can find the flight controller micro USB port that will enable you to configure it, the XT30 battery connector, a piece of foam for soft mounting the battery, and a simple battery Velcro strap. The thickness of the unibody bottom plate is 2.8 millimeters. Its wheelbase is 100 millimeters. The distance between the right motor and the left one is about 70 millimeters. And the distance between the front motors and the back ones is about 70 millimeters as well, so this frame features a true X pattern. The quality of the carbon looks good, and the frame also features reinforced arms, so I don't think that it's going to break easily, and it also features these extra carbon parts over here in order to protect the motors. In terms of weight, the Larva X weighs 50.6 grams. So it's heavier than the BetaFPV HX100, which also features a 100 millimeters frame, which weighs 46.9 grams, and the Happy Model Selphy X, which weighs only 35.8 grams. It is, however, lighter than the Daton Cube, which weighs 67.3 grams, but you should note that this comparison is not very fair, since this is the 3-inch version of the Daton Cube. Setting up the quadcopter is very easy. All you have to do is to connect the micro USB port using a USB cable to your computer. You should note that when powering on the quadcopter, even through the USB port, the VTX turns on, and you should always note that an antenna needs to be connected to the IPX connector, and I also recommend to set the power output to 25 milliwatts when configuring the quadcopter on the bench, because you don't want to burn the VTX. Then when you're all set, hit connect. You'll have to make sure that everything works properly under receiver. Under the configuration tab, you can configure the mode of the receiver. receiver. So this one features an integrated receiver. So you have to make sure that SPA-RX support is chosen. If you'd like to bind your FrSky receiver on FrSky D8, FrSky D will need to be chosen. And if you want to set it to D16, you will need to select FrSky X. In addition, I changed the gyro output frequency and the PID loop frequency from 8 to 8 to 4 to 4 because now the CPU load is significantly lower. And when it was set initially to 8 and 8, the CPU load was at around 35%. Next, you need to select your modes. So you need to define an arm switch. I set my modes to Horizon, Air mode, and next you need to select your modes. So you need to define an arm switch. I set my modes to Horizon, Air mode, and when it's set to in between, it's set.
Hey folks, I got a tip for you. It is a quick tip, but it is one that could save you from throwing out a flight controller that is acting like it has a bad gyro. Now this tip specifically applies if you have one of these flight controllers with dual gyros. And I don't mean the kind of flight controllers that you saw where you could select one of two gyros. There are flight controllers out there that maybe they have an MPU 6000 and an ICM 60802 or something gyro, and you can pick one or the other. We're talking about flight controllers like, well, the iFlight flight controllers are one of the ones that does it. Like on all the iFlight flight controllers, there are two gyro chips, and they do a thing called sensor fusion, where they average the data out between the two gyros to try to get better results. But here's the problem. If one of the gyros goes bad, then half the data that's going into the averaging is screwed up, and the quad will act like it's got a bad gyro. What are the signs of a bad gyro? Number one sign of a bad gyro is twitching, just like you'll be flying just in a straight line, and it'll kind of go. There are other signs of a bad gyro too, including the quadcopter just wanting to fly away and losing control. If you have one of these dual gyro flight controllers and you think you have a bad gyro, you can actually turn one of the gyros off. Instead of using both the gyros, you just use one or just use the other. And by getting rid of the bad gyro, you can actually completely redeem a flight controller that is acting like you would otherwise have to replace it. So here we are in Betaflight. I've plugged in a flight controller, and what I'm going to do is go to the configuration tab, and right here. Okay, I found it. Right here. The parameter is called gyro to use in the CLI, and that's what I was looking for. That's why I couldn't find it at first. This parameter tells the flight controller which gyro and accelerometer to use, and if you see both here, then you have the option to do this. You can just change it from both to first, and then save and reboot. And at that point, if your quadcopter starts flying good, then you're fine. On the other hand, if you do that and you still have the problem, change it to second. Maybe the first one was the one that was bad. If you try first and you try second and that doesn't fix it, then you may still have a bad flight controller that needs replacing. But a lot of times, this will fix the problem. It almost seems like on these dual gyro boards, gyros go bad more often than they did when we had single gyro boards. I'm not really sure if that's true. Maybe it's just that they're more popular. Or maybe it's just that if you have two... Oh, that's scientific. If you have two gyros per flight controller and the defect rate is the same, you will have twice as many flight controllers with bad gyros because there's two gyros, so there's twice as many gyros to go bad. Very interesting. Anyway, if you do have a dual gyro flight controller and it's acting like it has a bad gyro, try this out. It doesn't cost you anything to try it out, and in many, many cases, it fixes the problem. Hope that's helpful. Thank you so much for watching. Happy flying. What are you doing in here? The least you could do is subscribe or join my Patreon or, like, just here's another video I picked out for you. Jeez. A whole lot of you folks are about to smack yourself in the forehead and go, well, of course it works like that, because you already know the thing that I'm about to show you. But a whole lot of people are asking me this question. You're making the same mistake, and I want to clear it up so that nobody can make this mistake. Hopefully ever again. Haha, one can hope. Here's the mistake that you're making. You're trying to get bidirectional D-shot working. So you can do Betaflight's RPM filtering. And if you don't know what RPM filtering is, trust me, you want it. It makes your quad fly great. I have a tutorial about how to set up RPM filtering. When you're done watching this video, it's down in the video description, and I'll show you the full way to set it up. But a whole lot of people aren't watching that tutorial because if you were watching it, you wouldn't be making this mistake. You go in and you're trying to just set up your ESCs, right? You're trying doing whatever you do, and you set the motor direction, and you see the motor direction options are normal, reversed, bidirectional, reversed. And you think, well, if I want to do bidirectional D-shot, then don't I want bidirectional motor direction? No, you do not. This bidirectional, actually, I'm seeing this literally for the first time. They've actually given our the 3D model in CleanFlight just spins and gradually moves on all of the axes. That is the accelerometer probably, not the gyro. Let me tell you what you can do about that. The issue is that the 3D model spins and goes crazy. Now, hang on. Hang on. Good thing I had that right here. So the 3D model is based on the accelerometer. Which is why, by the way, if you go into the CLI and turn your accelerometer off, you'll see that the 3D model doesn't move. My 3D model moves. But the accelerometer is actually really slow to read. And so the way that CleanFlight does it is, I don't know the actual timing, so don't hold me to this, but it reads the accelerometer like 10 times a second. And in between, it uses the gyro to do basically dead reckoning, right? And it updates the status like 10 times a second from the accelerometer because the gyro has accumulated error. It's like saying, if I push down the pedal of the car and I go 10 miles an hour for 1 hour, I know I've gone 10 miles, right? But I didn't go exactly 10 miles an hour, so eventually I'll get off. That's kind of what's going on there. The gyro is used to update the position of the copter, and the accelerometer is only used to update it, every slowly. What I mean by that is that if this model is flipping out, you could have either a bad accelerometer or a bad gyro. But if you had a bad gyro, the copter wouldn't fly. So you probably know. Here's how you can tell, though. Go to the Sensors tab, and notice the gyro and the accelerometer are both up. And what you may see is that it's just sitting on the table right now. You may see that the gyros are all 0, but the accelerometer is drifting. Now notice the accelerometer is showing 1. Doesn't seem right. Well, the accelerometer is showing 1/2 g on the z-axis, which is a little strange because I definitely am on Earth. So I don't know what's going on there. This should be 1g right here. Something is up with that. That's clearly not right. But 0g on the XY axis because, of course, it's level. Now, if I turn it on its side, those will shift. Now I'm getting, this is clearly 1g scale. Oh, I see. That's it. No, 1/2 g. Oh, I don't know what the answer is there. But what you may see is that one of these numbers is way out of whack. So if the copter is flat on the table, you should see 1g or perhaps 1/2 g, although I have no idea why, on the z-axis and 0g on the x and y axis. If you see anything else that could explain why the copter is kind of going out of whack. But you said the copter spun out of control, and the accelerometer shouldn't do that because the accelerometer doesn't measure rotation. So maybe you have a wacky gyro after all. The bottom line is go to the Sensors tab, look at your gyro line, it should say 0, none of them. See if I move it now I'm wiggling it and it's all over the place. If it's sitting on the table but one of the lines is doing that, you have a bad gyro. And if it's sitting flat on the table and you read anything other than, well, apparently 1/2 g, although I have no idea why, I would think 1g is the right number, and 0g on the other axes, again, you may have a bad accelerometer. Let's see. Definitely the accelerometer. On takeoff, it spins out of control. Okay, so if you are in acro mode, then you are not using the accelerometer at all. That is a great troubleshooting tool. If you aren't sure if you have a bad gyro or a bad accelerometer, put the copter in acro mode. If you take off and it spins out of control in acro mode and you see the 3D model spinning, then you got a bad gyro. I'm sorry to say, 99% you have a bad gyro. The only answer is to replace the board. That's what I would say about that. I mean, no, it can't even be. I was going to say check your RC command to make sure you don't have your yaw stick deflected, but that wouldn't cause the 3D model to spin. The real kicker that you have a bad gyro is that the 3D model spins when the copter is just sitting on the table. That's the real kicker. It has to. You could try a calibration. You could calibrate the accelerometer, and of course you can calibrate the gyro using a stick command. But the gyro is automatically calibrated when you power up anyway, so you really shouldn't have to do that. Yeah. On the fence about the QQ190. Yeah, I'm a super fan of the QQ190 since I saw it. And again, I mean, I have mad respect for Shendrones. And I'm glad that so many people love their frames because they deserve so much success for what they do. But I'm a QQ190 guy. I would buy, if I was spending my own money, this is the one I would buy. I hear so many stories about people who, like, they bust these right here. Why are these horns here? This is not good design. It looks nice, but a sharp spot like that right at the front means that as soon as you go into a tree, you focused all the force. Whereas this one, look what's going to happen when you go in a tree here. It still protects your camera, but it's spread out. Nothing's going to break, hopefully, right? That's smart design. This looks sexy, but in fact is worse design, in my opinion. Yeah, so is there a gyro deadband? No. There's a gyro low-pass filter. You can use the gyro low-pass filter if you have too much gyro noise. That's what you're talking about. But the problem is, but if you've got a constant spin like that, you could try calibrating the gyro. The stick command is, I don't know, you have to look it up. It's, I don't know, you have to look it up. But if it's, like I said, the gyro is automatically calibrated when you first power up, so that's not, it shouldn't have to do that, and it probably won't solve your problem. The thing is, here's the thing, like, if your receiver is flaky and your signal is dropping out when you're flying, I don't see how you just go, you're not doing this is a hypothetical. If your receiver was flaky and your copter was dropping out of the air, you gotta solve that. You can't just be like, yeah, well, sometimes my copter drops out of the air. Your receiver, like, has to work. It's not like, sometimes my battery telemetry stops working and I might run my battery a little low. Okay, whatever. And likewise, if your gyro is screwy, you've got to fix that. Like, you can't, it's not safe to fly the copter with a bad gyro. Unless sometime you're going to just crash into it.
注意看，这只毛茸茸的小猴子正依偎在一只体型比自己大5倍的猩猩布偶上，就连走路都要时刻牵着它。原来这只小猴子名叫胖奇，于2025年7月26日出生在日本千叶县市川市动植物园。狮子座的胖奇出生时体重为500克，看起来十分有精神。可不幸的是，随后饲养员发现，胖奇的妈妈在生下他后身体十分的虚弱，并且后来也没有照顾胖奇的行为。于是从第2天开始，饲养员鹿野弘佑与宫腰俊平便开始进行人工哺育。那住过猴山的人都知道，在猴子的社会中，像是母猴弃养的情况的确是会发生的。不过一般情况下，会有其他母猴代为照顾幼猴。但是据饲养员鹿野弘佑说，在胖奇出生当天，他们先是保持距离观察，但并没有出现有其他母猴照顾胖奇的迹象。不过看胖奇这么可爱灵动，于是饲养员决定开始喂奶进行人工哺育。 养过猴子的人都知道，在小猴子出生不久后，通常都会紧紧地抓着妈妈的毛，一方面能让自己获得安全感，另一方面还能锻炼肌肉力量。但很显然，小胖奇似乎没有这样的机会，所以4亿元只能给他找来毛巾以及各种布偶玩具来当做替代品。而在众多选项中，胖奇君最喜欢的是一只红毛猩猩的布偶，看起来就好像把它当成了自己的妈妈一样。不过4亿元鹿野先生他们一开始就有一个很重要的考量，那就是最后一定是要让胖奇回到猴山的，也就是说不能让胖奇完全生活在一个隔离的环境当中。于是4亿元每一次去猴山喂食的时候，胖奇都会被一起带去猴山，在那里胖奇能闻到其他猴子的气味，能听得见猴群的叫声。对胖奇来说，这既熟悉又陌生。但是此时的胖奇还不能像其他猴子那样主动抓取食物，甚至对猴山还有一种陌生的恐惧感。他总是紧紧地抓着4亿元的衣服不放，好像那是唯一的安全绳索。就算4亿元鹿野先生把胖奇最爱的红毛猩猩布偶放在猴山里，想鼓励他自己留下来，胖奇也丝毫不敢松手，依然紧紧地抱着鹿野先生，怎样都不愿意离开。看到这一幕，就有网友说，扒在身上也太可爱。终于有一天，4亿元鹿野先生再一次把胖奇带进了猴山，轻轻地把它放在红毛猩猩布偶旁边。很多细心的网友都发现，4亿元在摆放布偶的地方撒了非常多的饲料。4亿元感觉是刻意在猴娃娃周围撒了很多饲料呢。不过毕竟胖奇一直以来都是跟人类一起生活的，突然间到了陌生的环境，身边又都是陌生的猴子，肯定没有那么容易就被食物转移了注意力。所以当胖奇君低头吃了2口地上的食物，等他抬起头时，发现4亿元鹿野先生已经转身离开。胖奇立刻慌张地追了上去，一把抓住鹿野先生的裤子，好像在说，你是不是把我忘在猴山了？但这一次4亿元鹿野先生并没有把他抱走，反而是再一次把小胖奇放回布偶身边，然后转身快步离开。当胖奇察觉到不对劲的时候，又急急忙忙往门口跑去。然而这一次他亲眼看见鹿野先生把门关上，在那一瞬间，小胖奇愣在原地不知所措。看到这边有网友留言说，大过年的我要哭死，真的要重新评估一下，也许逼他融入集体也不是一件好事。还有日本网友留言说，其实现在还是依赖着妈妈的时候呢，看到布偶被晾在身旁，就能明白他对4亿元有多依恋。不过也有网友觉得这跟人类的行为其实很像，好像刚上幼儿园的小朋友，每次要去上学之前都死死抓住爸爸妈妈不肯放开。这样说起来好像我以前就是这个样子的。然而惊魂未定的小胖奇马上就遇到跑来觅食的体型更壮硕的猴子，胖奇本能的感到害怕，立刻跳回红毛猩猩玩偶身边。有网友心疼的说，好心疼，他只是个宝宝啊。也有人在荧幕前替他打气，加油加油，可爱的胖奇君。在之后的几天里，胖奇大多数的时候都是自己一个人，没有其他猴子跟他玩，而且只要远处有传来猴群的叫声，或是看到体型更大的猴子朝自己靠近，胖奇就会本能的感到害怕，然后就开始寻找可以躲藏的地方。有一次，他钻进一个水泥做的方形洞口里，小小的身体缩成一团。他还不忘把红毛猩猩布偶拉过来，想挡在洞口前面。可是他试了一次，发现布偶太大；再试一次，发现角度不对。小小的胖奇手忙脚乱地推着、拉着，调整角度，但是怎样都无法把红毛猩猩布偶完整地挡住洞口。这一幕既笨拙又让人感到心疼。所幸没过多久，其他猴群就离开了这个区域。确认安全后，小胖奇才慢慢地从洞口爬出来。不过他并没有跑开，只是默默抱着红毛猩猩布偶。胖奇回到猴山后不久，有游客就拍到他的照片跟影片，并且在网络上疯传。胖奇也因此一路爆红。随后关心胖奇的人越来越多，他们都注意到，之后很长的一段时间，胖奇无论走到哪里，都会把那只红毛猩猩布偶拖到哪里。白天在猴山里移动的时候会牵着它，停下来休息的时候会抱着它，就连睡觉也一定会靠着它。而在这个寒冬，当猴山里其他猴子都相互抱团取暖的时候，只有小胖奇是抱着红毛猩猩布偶，显得十分突出。有网友说，在别的 post 看到他自己一个形单影只，右边小猴有家长陪伴，可见在那片对胖奇既陌生又充满压力的猴山里，这只红毛猩猩布偶就像胖奇的妈妈一样，给他带来安全感。不少网友看到这一幕都忍不住落泪。看到这画面我哭了，好不舍呀，好希望能抱抱孩子，好难受呀。都看哭了啦，小猴好孤单的感觉。看到小猴小孤独的样子鼻酸，大人孤独容易过，小孩孤独令人揪心。看到小猴紧偎着布偶，真想抱抱小猴，希望他快点交上好朋友，加油。 值得一提的是，四川市动植物园的官方账号在2月5日首次介绍胖奇，光是贴文就被转发超过8000次，浏览更是超过了300万次。游客从四面八方赶来，排起长队都想来看看胖奇。据报道，从5日开始到13日为止，加油胖奇相关贴文与转发数已累计达37000则。当然，在那段时间里，胖奇君最期待的时刻就是4亿元来送餐的时候了。每当到了饭点，胖奇君就会立刻牵着他的布偶妈妈翻过猴山，守在关着4亿元的铁门后面等待着。哪怕只是风吹的声音，胖奇都会立刻冲过去，跳起来努力的张望，想确认那个熟悉的身影是不是来了。只是他小小的身体总是差那么一点点够不到。而当铁门终于打开的那个瞬间，胖奇几乎是起飞般的扑上去，一把抓住4亿元的腿。而此时其他猴子早已四散开来，专心的抢食地上洒落的食物。只有胖奇君对那些食物似乎毫无兴趣，他紧紧抓着4亿元，像是在确认：你是来带我回去的吧？是要回去吃奶了吗？你不会把我留在这里的，对吧？有网友看到以后就说，既心疼又可爱，感觉把4亿元也当成妈妈的一部分了。甚至还有日本网友说，胖奇不是在门口等饭，而是在等4亿元啊，好心疼啊，好想一直抱着他呢。但是也有调皮的网友提问，到处都是屎是正常的吗？可是玩偶附近有很多屎，洁癖的人看了就……的确，这只红毛猩猩布偶已经被胖奇在猴山里拖过来拖过去，拖过来拖过去，浑身都已经脏兮兮的了。不过很快网络上就有人说，4亿元有帮胖奇换新的，但坦白说，天天都牵着布偶，终究不是一个好的解决办法。胖奇君似乎也意识到了这一点，于是开始主动和其他的猴子互动。这一天，胖奇脱离了布偶的怀抱，主动靠在旁边的大猴子身上，结果大猴子却把他推开。但胖奇并没有放弃，又一次尝试靠近，可是又被大猴子推开。伤心的胖奇赶紧跑回到布偶身边，直接把布偶盖在了自己的身上。还有一次，胖奇出于好奇钻进了一个洞里，对他来说这或许是在探索未知，但对其他猴子而言，或许早就已经有了既定的规矩，所以第一时间就有一只体型较大的猴子跑过来伸手去够他，像是在提醒他这不是你该去的地方。可是没等胖奇反应过来，就被里面某种景象吓到逃出洞口。小小的胖奇他明显被吓了一跳，立刻就冲过去抱起了布偶。然而还没来得及站稳，另一只大猴子又伸手抓了他脑袋一下，那一瞬间，胖奇整个僵住，靠在墙上瑟瑟发抖，抱紧布偶挡在身前。或许我们看不懂猴群里复杂的社会关系，也不清楚那是不是一种教育还是警告，但光是看着那小小的身影被赶来赶去，仍然能感受到他的无助。有网友看到这段画面就气扑扑的留言：我要网暴挞伐这2只大猴子。
第一单好的，然后派送也很近。大哥90号，
会不会走？
不会。
好，听我讲哈。
好。
你不要看你的手机。那听我讲。
听宝宝耐心讲解。
左转地下室。
左转地下室。
哎，上去就左转地下室。
好。
好，你地下室一直走，不要走出去，听懂吗？
好。
走出去的意思就是说地下室最上面的。你的右手边这边开始算。进去以后就是，你进去是左手边。出去以后变右手边。
好的。
好，第一阶是62。64。66。68。送过去。
好的。
听懂了吗？
听懂了。
有没有听懂？
听懂了。
听懂了哈。
好的。我去挑战看看，感觉怎么有点难？太有意思了。朋友们帮我一起记住啊，听懂了没有？进去，左手边，地下室。好，一直走。哎呀，太好笑了！你们帮我一起记住哦。一直走。
这个地下室也太长了。
64、66、68，哦，90，到，非常顺利。不然它那边有很多那个分岔路口，导航还真的是在那里就迷路了。你好 ，Uber 得到了。在门口。好，走下去。好，拜拜。你好，谢谢。用餐愉快。我得去夸夸那个保安大哥。
情绪价值安排到位。
对呀，谢啦，点赞，太好了。好了，去取第二个。30个商品，915。他买的都是那个薯片啊什么的，所以有一袋很轻。看好不好放啊？你要轻一点，我怕把他的薯片给压碎。你的好放吗，箱子？我载不了了。你这样不好骑车吧？我说你这样不好骑车吧，要小心注意安全，慢慢走。去派放。就是我的外面，爱就是有我承担着你。这个社区很大哦，你看这个基隆人啊，人均必备摩托车。看这个社区停的摩托车，琳琅满目。3栋17号，我要去问大哥比较快。你好，3栋17号，继续往。
3栋在下面。
哦，那幸好问你了，不然我又往上骑。
左边看就看到了。
好，谢谢。这个导航，你看他又继续让我往前走。今天的单还是稍微多一点，可能那个加码的没有了。你好，Uber 109。
来套熊猫情报。
你的也当比较久。
熊猫日文本来就不一样嘛。日文都要整个熊猫要多一点。因为熊猫就是先联络店家，再联络外送。
哦。
但是入口来熊猫刚好是电脑过来，先联络外送人，再联络店家。
哦，是这样子，有这种区别。就是外送员来等餐。
总结：熊猫先通知外送员，Uber先通知店家。
那你们今天单多吗？
就上
第3单了。哦，这里就3单了。
连后脑勺都透露这些了。
哎。我的，谢谢。谢谢。可以的。好。那洗衣弄在上面呢。真是搞笑呢。是楼梯上去的。走吧，去前面的岔路口。这里也是楼梯。唉，哈，讨厌，也是个楼梯，那就停这个平平的地方吧。跟我一起冲啊！冲啊！没有备注的就按个门铃。你好 ，Uber。啊？哎，可以骑车上来吗？哪里上来？从那边旁边上，对面可以上来。我看到2边都是楼梯，我就走上来。哦，好的好的，谢谢，拜拜。原来人家有那个机车，有那个骑车的路。没事，咱们运动运动。早上嘛，舒舒筋骨。咕咕咕咕咕。那就再跟我一起走吧。 楼梯下去吧。你好，Uber 813，好，跟我上号。好的。83，那我先到回收站。好好写下蓝色夹子那个，好了，自己看，谢谢。熊猫是的，熊猫先生287，好了。谢谢，这名小姐，谢谢。谢谢。哎呦，今天第2次撞到头。让原本更迷糊的这个大脑变得更迷糊了。来，请过，请过，慢慢走。你好，请问一下那个 Uber， 我要取 Uber 的单，然后他要提供
你的单号啊？你刚刚已经打单了吗？
我不确定，因为他是我第一次显示这种，就没有订单的。
你刚刚领了吗？
还没呀。
那就是后面啊。100是不是？
可是他没有订单号啊。
他这边有啊，009，然后你就打19啊，然后配对啊，对啊，看是不是啊？是它就会出现啦。然后就是领这张单。
好，然后这张单的在哪里？好，好的。老师，他没有袋子的。
他没有买袋子。
那我去看看他的袋子。我去拿个篮子，然后扯一个他的这个袋子。用他的保险袋来装一下。
会员。
错错，这种袋子好难弄。幸好它的都是那个小袋的东西，所以我就用它的这个保鲜袋装起来就好了。一袋。
你要买袋子不是拿我们的袋子哦。那个是只能用来装水果的。
那你带上去这个袋子，看要输。
对，那我没买袋子，就是要自己用你们的箱子装。
那还你了。这个全年的用他的新鲜袋的心，快还给他一个袋子。你好，
不管是电子包，但是公司的定价不高。
就是一定要记得带袋子了，每次出门的时候就忘记拿袋子。好吧，就这样的拿过去了。你有多的袋子吗？你有多的袋子吗？不要好了，谢谢。
大哥问我要袋子吗？
要吗？你看大哥真好，你真好，祝你生意兴隆。大哥你太好了，我是取那个外送，他没有买袋子，谢谢你哦，你最帅了。太好了，这有袋子就不怕掉了。谢谢。有袋子，你看。好像是这一栋。对，新野区的。真的，幸好刚刚那个大哥有借一个袋子给我，不然你看，他放在这个前台，散散的放就是没办法。最后一个地址又是有一点难度的。客户备注说不要看导航，那我看什么？ 为难我了。导航已经不走了，我又开启了这个找呀找地址，找不到一个符合的地址，怎么办？你说我该怎么办？我要问一下姐姐，姐姐，请问一下28巷你知道哪里吗？28巷。是往那边走。对呀，那边走。谢谢。喵喵，请问28巷62号在哪里？喵喵，请问28巷62号在哪里？你不知道啊？知道吗？不好意思。大哥，问一下28巷在哪里啊？
这边12巷。然后从这边随便向右转。那边就有28巷。
哦，好的。所以要穿过菜市场去哦。
哎，对，还是你从这边过去。
哦，这边可以过。
对，
对，
旁边有个巷子可以过。
哦，好的，谢谢你哦，谢谢。我终于看到28巷了。
门是不是开了？
开了。
然后4楼，谢谢。
拜拜。1、2、3、4。大哥几楼了？3楼。每次爬楼梯都不知道爬到几楼了。要的，谢谢，我翻一下。好，谢谢，可以了，拜拜。好啦，今天的行程就到这里啦，祝大家新春快乐，也祝大家情人节快乐。有情人终成眷属，没有情人的一起收下与你过过的这一份爱吧。非常感谢大家这几个月的订阅，还有关注，以及非常用心的一些评论。那新的一年呢，我也会非常用心的带给大家拍摄这个。